those headlines. Most are still asleep, and I ain't talking about no bedtime. The truth is not a Google search, you need to get your head right. The Greek goddess of illusion was called Media, and I'm not a coincidence theorist, I look for thread lines. Smashing every deadline, no longer smashing red wine. Though I can hear the bells chime, it feels like the end times. That probably should have been smashed on red wine, but the carnal mind is foolish. Obey and end up ghoulish. Don't get used by instinct, take control and learn to use it. Make a load of earnest music, earn a few quid, learn a few tricks. Sure, the truth is persecuted, this whole world is pure abusive. Know a bit about everything and everything about nothing. Figured out my noggin while you picture out shopping. You sit about watching while I dish it out. Stop it, I don't mean to sound cocky, I'm not even proud of it. It's a second nature to me, just for me to sound honest. I don't even need to sound honest, never been about profit. Everything but out on it, you can bet your house on it. Doubt I'll be out for the count when the sounds, and I'm down for the beat, no beat down. I mean, how long's it been? Help me out. I've been the only one who's held me down. All in the mind, hell freeze now. Still sick with it, healthy how? Few bars down and the world freaked out. I don't reach out, I seek out to speak out. I'ma recount the reasons they beat out.
Hello. Welcome, everybody, to the 509 Divine Pines podcast. I am your host, Joseph Daniel Pena, and it is June 6th, 2024, and we are on the West Coast, reaching out to the Midwest. We have the best conversation for you today. I want you guys to like, subscribe, share, and tell everyone around that this is going down. I am live on multiple platforms. I am on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Rumble, and a few more in the morning. So go ahead, get the RSS feed on Anchor or Spotify and share that out. You also got them on multiple podcast apps. So if you use alternative podcast apps, there's a chance that I might be there. Thank you guys. Scarlett is already dropping in. Hi, hello. How's it going? Yo, we have Greg Little today. Man, this conversation is big for you guys, and I hope it gets through to your brain, because what we're about to say is going to shake your guys' understanding about where we are on this planet and who's been around and what's been going down in the last 100 years, because things like all the mystical things we got going on, Edgar Cayce, Atlantis, giants, mounds, it's all here today, guys. But first, man, there are a lot of sponsors down below. I want you guys to go ahead and check out Okazi clothing for all the workout gear. I am a fitness trainer now, so in the real life, you guys can go ahead and hit me up for fitness training. I did get my fitness trainer certification finally, guys. Woo, yeah, feels great. I'm doing great things out there in the gym, inspiring people, motivating people. Because it's not just about a mental change; it's about a physical change, and we need to really change the way we act, perform, and live life if we're going to make a change in life. So go check out Okazi clothing for all the best workout gear, that Demon Slayer and new anime inspired clothing all the time. You could use coupon code 509 Divine Pines and thank me later. All right, man. Hey, dude, there's not really an introduction for everybody out there who's on the conspiracy side, man. Greg Little, dude, you have amazing conversations with a little bit on everything. Man, for everybody out there, let's go ahead and tell them about yourself. You guys can go ahead and find him on Twitter first. And I did drop a link below in the description for his books. So, floor is yours.
All right. Well, first, thanks for having me, Joseph. I know you've been trying to do this for a while, and I don't remember when we started, probably a year ago, something like that. I don't know. But it's a pleasure to be here. I'm trying to do a few more of these, and I know that we may be on here for a while. But okay, so my background, I started in all this weird stuff. I'll call it weird stuff, non-traditional professional areas, because I am a traditional professional, but my non-professional interest started in 1983. I've told the story a lot of times, and in 1983 I had finished my first book, and the first book was called The Archetype Experience, and it was a follow-up to the last book that the psychologist Carl Jung wrote. Carl Jung's last book was entitled Flying Saucers. Jung was fascinated with the appearance of UFOs and the whole flying saucer mythology that was developing at the time, as well as people who were then called contactees, not abductees, but contactees. And these were people who claimed that a UFO like landed in their field and then they went out and some beings walked out of it. And the beings always pretty much had the same message. And that was that we were destroying the earth and that we needed to do something about it, that we were not good stewards of the earth. But anyway, in 1983, I had dreams. While I was waiting for this book to be published, I was working as a mental health counselor in a prison. I was a psychologist also at the time, and I had a I was a licensed professional counselor, psychologist, mental health counselor within a prison setting. But these dreams suddenly hit me. And in the dreams, I was standing on an Indian mound. And it's something that I didn't even know what it was. Like,
Who do you think these entities are that you were interacting with? And like, don't you think from this is me my research and how the mental institution had these mental asylums?
yeah.
Don't you think that there's some correlation between mental illness and entities?
Well, there are theories about that. Absolutely. I'm very interested in DMT now, and the entities that people see with DMT. They are very, very similar to what Native Americans called the little people. And the little people was this mythological. I say mythological because it's mythology now, but to them it's real, and it's still real to Native Americans. There are these little creatures that can pop in and out of reality. They are invisible sometimes, most of the time. When they become visible, they are physically real, and they appear at very strange times. So I've talked to a lot of schizophrenics over the years, many schizophrenics. The truth about schizophrenia is that visual hallucinations are fairly rare with schizophrenics. Auditory hallucinations are very common, but the visual ones are pretty rare. I think that, I mean, we're skipping way ahead here with this, but I think that under the influence of, say, DMT, many people that take it report seeing spiritual entities. They're not like us. They're 2 to 3 feet tall. Some of them are 4 feet tall. They're very clearly spiritual beings. They interact with us. Some people say it sounds like a voice. Other people say that they're doing it telepathically, that's how we communicate. But of course, the mainstream view of people seeing that is that these entities are hallucinatory, that they're caused by just simple chemical reactions in the brain, and there's no physicality to them at all. So I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, not when it comes to the DMT entities. I have talked to a few schizophrenics that I thought might very well be responding to something that is in the environment. And by that, I'm not saying that there was something in the environment that was affecting them. And I've actually written a lot about that. I think that it relates to certain electromagnetic frequencies that are in the environment. We all have them. You have them all over the room you're in, the room I'm in here in Memphis, Tennessee. There's electromagnetic frequencies from every wire in this room, from the wireless itself, the Wi-Fi, from all my computers. Everything is spewing out electromagnetic energy. And these are in different frequencies, and different frequencies have different effects on us. So I believe that a lot of these mythological or legendary beings that people see and interact with them are entities that are related to the electromagnetic energy spectrum. And I've written about that quite a bit in a lot of books. It's in the newest ones also. I believe they take it that these electromagnetic entities, whatever else you want to call them, they get their energy from the earth. By the way, that's where we get our energy too. We get all of our energy from the earth, one way or another. All of
Right.
energy comes from the earth. And I believe that there are electromagnetic fields that occupy. And John Keel said the exact same thing in his books. And Carl Jung said the same thing in his last book, Flying Saucers. Jung actually said that the UFOs and UFO beings or entities, he didn't call them beings and entities at the time. That was in 1959, by the way. But he said they were they were in the electromagnetic energy spectrum outside of the visible light frequency. And visible light, the EM spectrum is a very wide band of energy, of electrical and magnetic energy, and everything produces it, everything reflects it. And within the very middle of this band, like you can't see cosmic rays, you can't see radiation. It'll affect you, but you can't see it. But you can see visible light. Visible light is in the middle. It's about a 5% range of the entire electromagnetic energy spectrum. On one side of it is ultraviolet light, which most of us cannot see. Supposedly no humans can. And on the other side of it is infrared. Infrared is a heat signature. But it's the heat signature in the electromagnetic energy spectrum. So it is believed by some, including me, and I just read a research article on this, it is believed that it's quite possible that when people take substances like DMT, it slightly alters the frequencies that the rods and the cones inside the retina of our eye, what they can pick up. All the rods and cones in our eyes are antenna. They're antennas. They're tiny little antennas, and they are picking up electromagnetic energy just like a handheld radio does, just like your cell phone does. Your cell phone has an antenna in it, and it's collecting electromagnetic energy. That's what it's doing, and it has different frequencies that it picks up. So
this is where your work on plasma beings and the idea on these plasmas being sentient all comes along with. I watched this movie, a Spectral, that's based on the Bose-Einstein condensate. It's kind of relative to how, makes me understand how to see these spirits and how to see these things.
Well, I haven't gotten into the plasma part. That's the next part. The plasmas are really a ball of energy. It's a ball of superheated energy, and electrons are being torn away from matter, and they start spinning, and it becomes electromagnetic. And then what happens? It starts pulling in physical matter. And there's actually a guy by the name of Meade Lane, dead now, but Meade Lane back in the 40s wrote about this and said that entities were an ethereal kind of plasma that could become physically real as they pull in physical matter, but it's only temporary. So plasmas form. We've had plasmas that are created in laboratories, been a lot of laboratories where they were created in. When they are sustained, when they have enough energy and they're sustained for a brief period of time, they form what looks like DNA, the double helix, DNA right in the center of the plasma. The plasmas then split and they become multiple plasmas. And again, now a plasma is a superheated ball of energy. That's what it is. And a lot of people call it gas, and it's superheated ball of gas. That's sort of true, but because it's pulling out all these electrons from atoms, it's changing things. So they also reproduce. These plasmas literally reproduce. And the physicists that did all this research have said that if we sustain the energy that we are feeding into these plasmas, they would probably become sentient. That is, they would have thoughts. They might be able to communicate with us. And actually, that summarizes what I believe that genuine UFOs are and genuine abduction experiences are. People are interacting with sentient plasmas that are coming out of an electromagnetic frequency to their motives
stimulate or change or alter the way that humanity is going. We are these genetic species to them. They look at themselves as some of these entities out there look at themselves as the offspring of the gods, the fallen ones, right? Or the Nephilim, the Rephaim, right? And these guys are As the Ephesians says, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers in heavenly places, and those things, the
That's
things
a
in the
great
sky.
quote.
So
Yeah.
the electromagnetic properties that are being radiated from these entities are altering the way people think. When you see these celebrities, they say that they're under the possession of some other entity or something. They're being supercharged by this higher entity, because this body down here doesn't know any better. It's just being controlled. So that's why I think some of these possessions are influenced by what we're eating and what we're consuming, and it's weakening the body and the neural receptive ability. If the brain isn't able to process and work and use its full network, then another entity is going to change its electromagnetic properties to consume that entity. We see that it's happening all around the world.
I have no doubt that we're poisoning ourselves between plastics and electromagnetic energy pollution is very real. The government's actually trying to do something about it, but they can't. It's been around a long, long time, but it wasn't around in the 1800s. There was
It's
no
only the last
electric.
100 years.
Yeah, it's only been recently, but microplastics are everywhere. Same thing the last 100 years. Microplastics, we have no idea what they're doing to us. I suspect microplastics are related to the fall in birth rate. I think they're related to many other societal movements that we see going on right now, that our chemistry has been altered and changed. I do believe that that's true. I don't know about the entities controlling us. I've said before, and I will say this again, maybe I can say it in a different way. I don't think we understand the motives at all of whatever these forces are. I don't think we understand their motives. We try to understand it based upon what our motives might be. We're out there exploring space. You probably follow Elon Musk, and going to Mars, and a brilliant guy. I love most of his work. I can't think of anything I dislike in it, but I like all that he says. But um, we take what we are doing in space, exploring and whatever, and we kind of apply that to what we see in the UFO field, or the UAPs as they're now called, that maybe they're doing what we would do. I don't think so. If it's a plasma based entity, it has its own purpose. It's kind of like angels in the Bible. You gave us a great biblical quote a minute ago. The Bible makes it very clear what angels are. Angels are messengers. The message can come in different ways. The message might be destruction of a city. Go save
Right.
the couple people there that are worthy of being saved, and then destroy the city. That's what an angel might do. Or the angel might come to someone like Mary or someone else and say, "Hey, we got a message for you." That's what they do. Angels overlook things. They oversee. That's more of an appropriate word. They oversee things and so on. But I'm not sure that we can really truly understand the motives of these things. In fact, they may not have a motive. And something that I actually believe now, and it's based on some of the work in Yakima and some of the work that was done in the Piedmont area of Missouri, that these entities, this phenomena, may actually be interacting with us and changing along with us. And the reason that I say it's changing along with us is because it seems like it is evolving, that whatever technological state we are at, the manifestation that comes from this other side is always maybe 2, 3, 4 decades ahead of us. That's all it is. So if you go back to the biblical times, you've got angels. Well, they're spiritual beings, and they have wings and all that. If you move it forward and you get into maybe the 1800s, I mean, I skipped over Babylon and
Or the
Sumeria and
Sumerian
all.
text.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that's
the ancient
actually,
landline.
yeah, I skipped over that, but same thing. But when you get to like the 1800s, you have a completely different thing. You have the ships, the airships that are seen all over.
The
They were
blimps,
seen, yeah, they look
electromagnetic
like
blimps.
blimps, but blimps weren't around when they were seen, but they were being developed. So it's like it's always 10, 15 years ahead of us. In the 1950s and 60s, people saw a lot of UFOs, and the aliens, the contactees, what they usually saw, they're called Nordics. They often had long blonde hair. They
Would
were
you say
very,
those were the Palladians?
I don't know. I really don't know. I would not
Probably
even
not, right?
guess.
They're,
I wouldn't
maybe
guess.
different. Yeah.
I think that that it's all coming from the same source.
Hmm.
It's a natural, when I say natural, we are natural, plasmas are natural, electromagnetic energy is natural. It's all natural. And it's the way it's supposed to be. And we are evolving alongside this other thing, this other spiritual thing, whatever it is. And I believe it knows we're here, just like we know it's there. It may not even know what our motives are. It might be sitting, it might be on the other side and saying something like, I wish these idiots would quit putting power lines everywhere and gone to G4, G5, and or 5G and 6G and whatever we're going to now. I think they may actually be saying that. Or why are you poisoning the earth with plastics? So we're at the point where, well, I'll stop with that.
Well, okay, so all right, man. It's kind of an understanding on there's the sons of darkness and the sons of light, right? This is getting into a whole bigger idea on why this is all happening. Well, if the Bible is being correct when Lucifer was given dominion over earth to take the rebellers of God, that would be one of the sons of darkness. And we are seeing this as a lot of authors would say, there's this technology of the gods, technology of the fallen angels, technology of the angels. And I know Andrew Collins likes to speculate a little bit that this Ark of the Covenant and maybe some of these things, what we're seeing is there's an ancient war of technology that's happening. I kind of think that is currently what's happening. And yeah, the rulers in the sky are like they're going to be a little bit ahead of us at all times. But from the decisions that's being happening by the New World Order currently to make us like inferior species, just like totally, rule us in all these different ways. It would fall among the lines of the sons of darkness, the sons of Belial. But let's go ahead and get into this. So you had discovered some mounds, or you're about to discover some mounds. Let's go. Let's get back on track to get to let everybody know like where this is all started at.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me mention that sons of God thing. The sons of God and the law of children of the law of one, light and dark.
That's like an Emerald Tablets thing.
Yeah, it is. Edgar Cayce talked a lot about that. I don't know if there is some agency out there trying to enslave us. I think we'll know if it happens. But I think we're already, we're doing it to ourselves. But anyway, okay, back to my dream. All right, so I had these dreams standing on a mountain. All right, I'm a professional working. I have published lots of professional journal articles. People all the time, skeptics, will put that in a peer-reviewed article. Well, I've published in lots of peer-review articles or journals. I don't want to do that anymore. But anyway, back then, while I was doing all this professional work, and I had my first book in process. Back then, it took about 2 years to get a book out, and I was waiting for that book to come out. I had this series of dreams, and in the dreams, I would be standing on a mound and taking a picture. Then I'd stand on another mound and take a picture. Then I would stand on another mound and take a picture. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and go, what the heck is going on here? And this went on night after night after night, at least 5 nights. My wife and I have talked about this. I don't know if it was 7 nights, but we know it was at least 5. Because the last night that this occurred, we saw a spider. We saw a giant spider about the size of the hat you have on there. That's a pretty big spider. And we tried to find this spider. It was in our bedroom. We saw it together. We couldn't find it. After we both saw this spider together and looked everywhere, we couldn't find it. And I decided, not knowing what Indian mounds were, never visiting an Indian mound, thinking what a lot of people thought about mounds, and that is, well, when somebody died, they put them on the ground and they'd throw dirt over them. and a little mound would fill up over them. That's what I figured. That's all that a mound was. I didn't know. So we went to our first site shortly after, like the next weekend after we saw that spider. And it was a site called Chucalissa in Memphis, Tennessee. And the moment we walked in the door, and it has a museum you have to go through first. So you go to the museum, then you can go out in the mound site. But the moment we walked in the door, they had a display there. And the display had a picture or illustration color of the exact spider my wife and I had seen. And I mean, like the face you just made, like, whoa, like that.
That's a shock.
That was. And so we decided then that we would start visiting a few mound sites. And shortly thereafter, I don't really know when. I've thought a lot about this and I don't know when. Shortly thereafter, I decided I need to do a book on mounds and like an encyclopedia where I take pictures of all the known mounds left in the United States. That was the original goal, and put that into a pictorial encyclopedia. That was around 1983. Well, it was 83 when we did the first visit, probably around 84 when I got this mound thing. Then in 1989, so we started visiting mounds. That's what we did. 1989 then, before you were born, I will say, in that year, we had a shaman, a medicine man of the Cheyenne tribe, come and stay with my wife and I in Memphis for exactly 30 days. He came with his wife and his kids. And during those 30 days, he was very grateful. We talked a great deal. By then I knew a lot more about mounds. I knew a lot about Native American legends and so on. And during that period of time, I got to hold the sacred arrows, the 7 sacred arrows of the Cheyenne. He did several rituals for us to show us a number of rituals. And we talked a whole lot. And I tell the story in the book, Origins of the Gods, one of them with Andrew Collins that we co-authored, about taking this guy into a private practice office that I had at the time, where I was working with a psychologist and psychiatrist in private practice. And we had an electromagnetic device in there called a gram, like graham cracker is how it's spelled, a gram potentializer. You can't get these anymore, but it looks like a couch with no back. You lay down on, almost like a good massage table. And then when you're laying down on it flat, you'd lay on it, it rotates in a circle, and it takes it 7 seconds to do a rotation. And then it creates a bubble of electromagnetic energy around the person laying on it. And it is set to the Earth's ambient electromagnetic field, which is called the Schumann resonance. And so you lay on this thing, you can change the North Pole to your head or to your foot. Now, Edgar Cayce actually said that mattered. Cayce would do different kinds of readings, and he would put his head toward the north or the south, depending on the type of reading that he was going to do. So on this bed, I call it a bed, the gram potentializer, I let this Native American shaman lay on it. I went into another office and started doing insurance paperwork. And so about 15 minutes after I started this up, where he was laying there, he closed his eyes, he came walking into my room where I was doing this paperwork, and I looked up and I said, "You done?" And he said, little blue people." And I said, his name was Lou White Eagle, by the way. I said, "Lou, what are you talking about?" He said, "Little blue people. Little blue people are in the room." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Little blue people came into the room." So I immediately walked into the other room, like any white man would do, walked in and looked, and the machine was still doing its rotation, so I turned it off. I didn't see anything, but Lou was really shook up. And then he explained to me that when he laid there, after about 5 minutes, he felt uneasy and he opened his eyes. And that room had 3 large windows looking out to a grassy and treed area. And he said that there were a whole bunch of little tiny blue people that were right against the window looking in. And after he noticed them, they literally just pushed their way through the glass and the walls, not broke it, but just melded through it and came into the room. And then he got paralyzed. And then he said they surrounded his body and started poking at him with his hands. Not anything that hurt, but it was so disturbing to them that it broke his paralysis. And he stood up, and that's when he walked into the room where I was. And so I showed him the
That's like
cover.
the movie Jupiter Ascending.
I
Right
haven't
there.
seen that. Yeah.
Okay, so it's with I think Channing Tatum and the girl from
Okay.
that 70s show, Mila Kunis.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to Jupiter, and it's pretty much human trafficking. There's this clip where there's these alien grays, and they're in a room and nobody can see them, and they're over here operating on the girl, and then
Nobody sees them.
Channing comes with some technology and then exposes them, and yeah, go fights them. It's insane. Exactly how you said it. They go through walls and everything.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's the same experience Betty Andreasen had many years ago. Betty Andreasen, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, one of the most famous abductees of all time, said the same thing. These little aliens came right through the walls. Well, Lou White Eagle, the shaman, told me point blank. He said they're the little people, and the little people are the most powerful spiritual entities that appear to humans in Native American lore. The little people are very important. They can be the harbinger of bad things, but most of the time they have deep spiritual knowledge that they impart to whoever interacts with them. They usually come first as a trickster. That's another concept in Native American lore and mythology. And it's one that also fits the UFO field, because all of the early contactees in the 1950s who said, yeah, these aliens landed in the field behind me and came and visited. Well, the aliens often were asked, where did they come from? And what they say, well, we come from Venus, we come from Mars, we come from Jupiter. Some said, oh, we live on the moon. And we know that they're not on, I mean, their descriptions were that we live in cities there. We know there's no cities on those places. We just know that. There might be something underground. We can't see underground.
Could be extra planes around this territory.
Maybe, but it's still not visible to us.
Right.
So anyway, the Native American trickster is a concept that relates to getting knowledge, and the trickster usually appears first in some sort of a symbolic form. And the trickster is designed to use your own problem areas, your own weaknesses against you. And that's what it does. If you're really hungry, if you're starving and you're really hungry, then that's what it'll take advantage of.
There's always this reference that I like to make. It in the book of Enoch. It states how these Nephilim and these fallen angels, these giants that you also like to talk about, they were punished to be on earth forever as lost spirits, as spirits that were meant to wander the earth. And I like to think of the succubuses and incubuses and all these demons that a lot of people like to invoke, from Lilith or Lucifer and all these. It's kind of in that same ballpark aspect.
Yeah, I wrote some very weird stories about the incubus and succubus reports from convents. There are stories from convents, and priests have written some of the stories where the incubus and succubus would appear, and they actually locked up some of the people in basically a prison cell and observed them and saw it happening. I wrote about some of that in a 1994 book called Grand Illusions. And yeah, there's some, and I became convinced way back then in the late 80s and early 90s that there is something to all this, that it's not all in our heads. It's not all made up. It's not all just legends that have no basis in reality, or stories that people like to tell. There is something real to all this, but I don't think it's what it appears to be. And that's the whole function of a trickster. The trickster is not what it appears to be. It's a test. You have to get by the trickster to get to the deeper spiritual knowledge. That's the whole deal. They never come and just hand you spiritual knowledge like on a plate and say, here's the secrets of the universe. They don't do that. What they do is they test you first. You're always tested. And that's one of the prime ideas in Native American spirituality. Most people don't talk about it or mention it, but anytime you get involved in their spirituality or involved in the rituals, there will always be a trickster involved in the front end. Always. Sometimes you can see it. Sometimes you can tell who or what it is, but you have to get by the trickster. And if you do, then you will get a deeper level of knowledge. But there's more and more levels. So that's the function of the trickster. Psychology has written a lot about tricksters. I actually found out about tricksters from Carl Jung. Carl Jung's Flying Saucer book in 1959. He said this is just like the trickster in Native American mythology. It's the exact same thing, and I believe that that's the case. I believe Jung was correct with that.
Yeah, I do think that there's a idea that what we're seeing with these UFOs and entities, some of them they're very trickster. They're very they just kind of want to play around. Sometimes I've heard of stories of items just being moved over and over and over again until someone gets the point and message of what's happening. I mean, when we look at the nuclear program, these bombs are constantly being shut down supposedly by these entities. The UFOs flying over all around the world, shutting down these reactors. And we had to get the message. They were pretty much being a trickster on us.
Interesting.
So when we look at these mounds, and we're getting back to your book a little bit. What do you think? Who do you think are under these mounds? Are these the giants? Are these the fallen? What?
Well,
when we're looking, I guess that the question is, what? Yeah, who do you think these mounds are, and are they related to like this ancient giant hybrid elite?
Okay, so that I'll get to that. So who made the mounds and when? Mound building in the Americas started probably around 9,000 BC, 11,000 years ago.
And these are the ones that Graham Hancock are banned from, right?
Well, Graham was banned from Serpent Mound.
Okay.
And when he was banned from it, he wasn't banned for walking on it. They didn't go that far. What they said is you can't film, you can't do any interviews there, you can't film there, which kind of is what it is. I know some of the people that ran the place. I don't want to get into the politics of it.
Hey, you know what? You can drop it. I don't even care.
Yeah, I know Graham pretty well too. We've interacted many times, been to conferences together. Graham's a really interesting guy, probably the smartest one of us out there. Andrew's probably tied with him though. Andrew's a smart man.
Both of those guys are
yeah. But Graham is pretty much.
You're up there too, man.
Well, I try, but I'm not as involved in all of this as they are. I still am professional. I still have my other profession, my real.
Yeah. They're hardcore, way deep.
But okay, so mound building in the Americas probably started in 9,000 BC, 11,000 years ago. The oldest mound in South America right now dates to 8,400 BC. It's in Bolivia. It's in the Amazon basin of Bolivia. Now think about that. That's 10,400 years old. Now, but that's in the Amazon. The oldest one in North America right now is at
Olmec time, right?
Oh, it's way older than Olmec. I know this stuff's way older than Olmec. The oldest mound in the United States is in Louisiana. It's on the campus of Louisiana State University at Baton Rouge. I taught for LSU, the LSU campus at Shreveport for about 4 years. Have been to the campus at LSU many times and the campus mounds. Those in 2022, just 2 years ago, those were redated to 9,000 BC, 11,000 years ago. The oldest known structure in Egypt, the absolute oldest that's known, is a mound. It's a mound. Before they built pyramids in Egypt, they built mounds. And the oldest one in Egypt dates to 7,000 BC. The oldest
which
one.
Which one's this?
I don't remember the name of it. It's not any of the pyramids. It's just a mound. It's just like American mound. It has a name. I'm not sure. I couldn't pronounce it anyway. The oldest one in Turkey is about 500 years older than the one in Egypt. So right now, the oldest mound known in the world is in Louisiana. Nothing even gets close to it. Now, it is true that Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe they're anomalies. There's others of those now. There's probably a dozen of those sites in Turkey that they'll uncover, and that's probably the evidence of Graham Hancock and Andrews' lost civilization that existed during the last ice age, and the end of the last ice age pretty much wiped them out. And I think that's what that is, that it does exist. But the oldest mounds right now are in North America. There are go ahead.
That's like that's along like the Mississippi River, right? And the Cahokia pyramids and mounds and all that.
Cahokia, all of those are in what's called the Mississippi River Basin, which also includes the Ohio River, the Tennessee River, the Missouri River. Trying to remember the one in the Dakotas out of the Missouri. There's another one. That's all the Mississippi drainage basin. And yes, that is packed with mounds. There's probably 1 to 2 million mounds in that area alone. However, the mounds were built also all the way to the East Coast, the entire East Coast, Florida. They were everywhere along the East Coast. They were in California. California had thousands of mounds. Washington State, where you are, had at least probably about 1,000 minimum. There's roughly 200 to 300 that I'm aware of in Washington State and Oregon that still exist. They're not as big as Cahokia. These are much smaller. These are smaller mounds than the giant one at Cahokia, and we'll explain that one in a minute. But they're also found in North and South Dakota. They go up into Canada. They are found everywhere. Even in the Southwest, although in the Southwest, where the so-called Anasazi, which are actually best called the ancestral Puebloan people, they did mounds too, but they also built all the stone pueblos. And by the way, the Spanish called the mounds, the houses on the mounds in the East, they called those pueblos also. That's where the term comes from. So if you read the Spanish chronicles about their trips through the mound areas in 1539 to 43, they'll say we went into the pueblo, and they're talking about the temple on top of a mound. So there's probably several million of those that once existed. I kind of pushed it in the first Mound Encyclopedia and said I thought there's at least 1 million mounds, because the Smithsonian in the 1800s actually cited a figure of 100,000 sites that were known at the time. And a site might have, like Cahokia, up to 120 to 200 mounds. There's still sites around today that have 60 and 70 mounds at them. But since then, I found lots more, and archaeologists have found lots more. There's way over 1 million existing. The state of Minnesota alone, the head of archaeology for the state of Minnesota published recently that there are 12,500 known mound sites in Minnesota. And there are probably 1 million in the state. 1 million.
Do these have any astrological components, like how I had Dennis Stone on with America's Stonehenge, and all of those sites had these astrological?
Yep, I know Dennis well. Been there, talked to him recently. As a matter of fact, great guy. Yes, these astronomical alignments. Mounds have alignments to stars. Of course, the solstice and equinox, the sunrise and sunset on the summer solstice, and the equinoxes and the winter solstice, those are usually incorporated into mound sites. And so what they would do is, from the top of one key mound, usually it's the shaman's mound or the chief's mound. If you would come out of the temple, stand at the top of a ramp and look in a certain direction, you would see a mound. On the top of that mound, there's a pull. And the pull would be right on the edge of the horizon. You could see the horizon right across the top of the pull. And that is exactly where the sun would set or the sun would rise on those key days. So that's how they set up those alignments. They also had them set up to various stars. We know the Pleiades were sometimes a part of it. We know that Orion, particularly Orion's belt, which was not seen as Orion by them, was seen as the hand constellation. It was a severed wrist, a hand in the sky. That's what they saw. Orion's nebula was most important to them. Also, the star Deneb, which is the brightest star of the Cygnus constellation, also sometimes called the Northern Cross. That was in it. And Scorpius, or Scorpio, some people call it. The Scorpius constellation in the southwest was also often one that was targeted by it. And these were not really discovered until fairly recent times. As late as 1989, archaeologists really had no idea what to look for. But it was the discovery of what's called the path of souls that led to real research. Because you can go to a site, say you go to a site in Arkansas, which is now called Plum Bayou Mounds. It used to be called Toltec. There you have like 20 mounds in a C shape. They're in this giant, they look like a big C, and they're all over there. And when I say C, I'm talking about the letter C. It's like, half of a circle. So you got these 20 mounds arranged there. So they went in back in the 80s and published in 1989. They tried to figure out what the alignments were. They could see that the summer solstice and winter solstice, sunrise and sunset was incorporated into it, as well as the equinoxes. But they didn't know what time of the year to look. If you actually run a computer program and you watch a specific spot on the horizon and you run it through a year, you'll see a whole lot of stars set into a site, because over the year, the rotation of the Earth changes what appears on the horizon, the stars that appear on it, either the rising or setting of those stars. But they didn't know when to look. When should we look? And they didn't know what stars to look for. But now we know what stars to look for. And that started around 2004 or so. Tons of research came out then showing the important stars were Cygnus, Deneb, Orion, the Pleiades, and then the solstices and the equinoxes. Those were the key things to look at. Also, the Scorpius constellation, that was important. So loads and loads of sites have these incorporated.
There are the Pleiades mentioned in the Bible, but when I look at that, how the pyramids and all these ancient megalithic cities were built with tunnels underneath. Is there any aspect that there are tunnels underneath all these?
There are some. I don't talk about this much. I don't want to tell people, here's where you go and how you get in. There are tunnels involved with several mounds and several mound sites. Naya, Waya, the Choctaw. I'm trying to pronounce it. And I can't. It's the Choctaw Center of the Earth Mound, which is about 2/3 of the way down Mississippi from Memphis, just straight down in Mississippi. Very large mound. The word in Choctaw is leaning hill, but I can't pronounce it. There is a tunnel there, and which is weird because it's in Mississippi. I'm not going to say where the tunnel goes. They've closed it off. They don't want people to know about it. There are some tunnel areas under other mound sites. Not a lot that I know of. And some of these places have actually had the tunnels closed off. They have collapsed them because they don't want people to go in. And like, for example, if you're going to create a state park at a mound site, you don't want a dangerous tunnel or cave that people can stumble into and get hurt. So they've often closed those out.
It's not even just about people stumbling in. When we look at Phil Schneider, when he went over there to Dulce and he experienced some entities underneath. When we look at the 1850 Battle of Kentucky against the Giants, where I think a tribesman, a townsman of men went and battled some giants, pushed them into a cave. We hear the Indians talk about these giants in caves. I mean, there's this interesting map correlation of how like the cave network and the missing people network is like
similar,
spot on,
related. Yeah, they're correlated. That's true. They are correlated.
And then to mention the Emerald Tablets again, it makes reference to how in the underworld there's like the netherworld, and it's pretty much access through the cave networks. Inner Earth, this netherworld, this there's something in there. There's something in the earth, and I guess that can be reference to what these plasma beings, these demons. What would you call these things? These dark ones.
Well, I'd call them the same thing that the Native Americans do. There's a lot of terms that different tribes use different terms. But I wouldn't know what to call them. Here's the truth about all the giant stuff. The truth as I see it. You ask who's in the mounds. Okay. Out of these millions of mounds, the Smithsonian pulled millions of skeletons.
Smithsonian is.
Smithsonian pulled millions of skeletons, millions. They
They hit them forever, huh?
they probably still have over a million. They have hundreds of skulls. They were mainly interested in skulls initially in the 1800s, and they wanted skulls to display in the National Museum. However, a guy by the name of Clarence Bloomfield Moore himself excavated over 3,000 mounds in the Southeast. This one guy from Pennsylvania. Back in the 1800s, they were called antiquarians. A wealthy guy who'd make a connection with a museum could get a letter from the museum. This guy's working with us on behalf of us. He's going to publish his results. And so Moore traveled all over, dug into the mounds. What he do with the skeletons, they discarded them. He did not keep any of those. He was only after artifacts. That's all he was doing, artifacts. So in the Smithsonian's reports, they wrote, it was called the Bureau of Ethnology, the Smithsonian's Bureau of Ethnology. In the many skeletal remains that they reported 17 in their reports that were from 7 feet to 7 feet 8 inches tall. And I did a statistical calculation on that and put it in the book Path of Souls. I actually have one here. That's the book, Path of Souls. And in that calculation, I took a site in West Virginia where the Smithsonian went in and dug into roughly 20 mounds. There were Edina era mounds. And in that one area, they pulled 7 skeletons out. 7 of the 17 came from the Kanawha River Valley in West Virginia, near South Charleston, West Virginia. And I did a calculation based on all of the skeletons that they pulled out and with the in comparison to the 7 large ones. And it doesn't get close to chance. It's impossible for that to have happened by chance. And even mainstream archaeologists who read this, who were going to say bad things about it, said that's brilliant. And they called it the Edina elite hypothesis. So let's explain that. Edina, spelled A-D-E-N-A, is a type of mound culture. It's very old. It probably goes back to 2,000 or 3,000 BC. And they built gigantic mounds, 70, 80 feet tall, that look like a cone.
That's pretty cool.
Well, up to 84 feet is the highest one I know of, and that was in Louisiana. But they look like the top of an ice cream cone. You know, they're circle. They're giant. They resist erosion unless you let trees grow in them. Native Americans didn't let trees grow in them. They usually built a gigantic tomb right at the base. It's called the sub-base. So they would dig a pit first. They lined these pits either with stone, very well-made stone chambers that look identical to the ones in Great Britain. And in Malta and Great Britain, absolutely.
Sound chambers.
They look absolutely identical. And then they would either put giant slabs of stone on the top of them when they were done. They also have a walkway. They'd have like a tunnelway going into these stone chambers. And they'd put a roof on it, either made out of huge logs with stone on it or just stone slabs. Then they'd build the mound on top of it. And then as time passed, someone else later would come along and put other burials on top and enlarge the mound. And then someone would come along and put other burials and enlarge the mound and enlarge the mound. Some mounds literally had thousands of burials. Not an exaggeration, thousands. But the ones in West Virginia that I'm talking about, most of them only had the burials that were in the tombs. So, statistically speaking, right now, about 1 of every 147,000 people in the world are 7 feet tall. being 7 feet tall is exceedingly rare. There's a lot of 6-foot people, a lot of 6'7" people, but statistically, it's one of every 147,000 people. And if you've ever read about Native Americans, they'll tell you, well, they were 5'4", 5'3" in height. The women were generally 5'1" in height.
Well,
I'm
I
just
have
telling you
been.
what mainstream archaeology says.
Oh, I have been hearing about the tribe in Florida that was around 8 foot, 9 foot
Yeah,
tall,
I know
and
exactly
10
what you're
foot
talking
tall.
about. If you go into the
The
museum,
Seminoles, right?
well, no, they weren't the Seminoles. The Seminoles are more
Oh,
modern,
sorry.
but they are a branch of the Calusa. And there's a place called Amelia Island that has a museum where they show the debris illustrations of it coming from the 1700s. There's a series of illustrations showing the natives meeting the first Spanish that came in. And they show the natives that, yeah, they all look about 8 feet tall. When you go into the museum and you walk through it, the docents there will tell you, no, they really weren't that tall. They say this at every museum except one, and I'll tell you where that one is. The one where it is, they'll tell you the truth. But
Where
they'll
is
tell
it?
you, no, the Spanish exaggerated, and the other thing was this: they wore their hair up in bundles. They put them up in a big beehive, and the Spanish didn't know any better. They thought that was the top of their head, and they mistook them for being tall, even though all of the Spanish chronicles use the term giants over and over, as do the British reports that were made in South America, Tierra del Fuego and the southern tip. Admiral Byrd, there's all these Captain Byron,
So
Lord
I mean,
Byron.
The Bible clearly talks about it with
Absolutely,
Anak
absolutely.
and was it Goliath, right? My pastor likes to talk about this in the Giants and when in his sermons, how Goliath was speculated to be like 9 foot tall, and
Yeah,
some of these other the Og the giant
yeah,
was also like 13. These guys were big.
yeah.
This tribe of Nephilim, these fallen, they're pretty much hybrid, as a you think ancient giant hybrid elite.
Yep. Well, Andrew and I, in our book Denisovan Origins, we speculated that these are the Denisovans, that the Denisovans ultimately came from Europe and got to here. And before they got to Europe, they were in part of Asia and they swooped through. Long, involved story. But anyway, what the Adena elite hypothesis is that these people, the natives, the indigenous natives, that whenever these tall people arrived, or whatever they were, a hereditary, family group or whatever, that they revered height, that it was really important. They came to worship them and so on. And yes, there are legends about it. In Native American lore, they actually talk about how they exterminated them. We'll get to that in just a minute. But he called it the Adena elite hypothesis because almost all of the Smithsonian's reports came out of Adena mounds, of these large ones. And statistically, it's just not possible that out of their population in this one area, they'd put 7 people all pretty much in the same time frame dying and being put in these tombs. It just doesn't make any sense. So they were the leaders. They were the elite. And Andrew and I believe that they were Denisovans. It would take hours to explain who the Denisovans were, but it's an extinct branch of humanity that was discovered. I think it was 2019 or 2020 when they were first found. And Andrew was one of the first people to actually write about them. So anyway, okay,
So
so go ahead. Sorry.
do these cultures, whether it's the mound builders or Denisovans, have their role with entheogens and the shamanic practices? Is that something that's been a part of them, part of their cultures?
Yes.
The ancient giant. So these ancient giants, or the mound builders, or the Denisovans, are these ran by shamanic practice cults, or what do you?
Yeah, we know this is relatively new too. We know how it's like Cahokia. All right, this part of it begins with Cahokia. I do want to say one more thing. The 17 found by the Smithsonian, all of which were 7 feet and up, they're not the only ones archaeologists have found. There's another dozen or so that later excavations have found, but they're all in Adena mounds. All of them were found in Adena era mounds. There's one in Mississippi that was found that is not Adena era, but that's the only one I know. Otherwise, okay.
Are there any elongated skulls that are found in this, or is this
Yeah, oh
just
yeah, there were elongated skulls found, but
Mhm.
none of the, to my knowledge, none of
Alright.
these giants had the elongated skulls.
Just two different classes, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the elongated skulls seem like those were people that wanted to look like the elite. That's, the thinking has always been that they would put those boards on the head of the children to increase their status, to make them look taller and to look more like the members of the elite. I don't know if any of that's true.
I don't think so.
Well, I know what mainstream.
I think that there's a reason for that they're, when we look at the, what is
Yeah.
it, the sutures, right? The line
Sutures. Yeah, the
sutures,
sutures. Yeah.
in the brains. There's definitely a clear difference in a lot of these different schools.
Well, I'm sure that by doing that boarding, it definitely changes the brain.
Well, no, I mean,
No, I'm saying not just the sutures, but I'm thinking it changes you in other ways too, because it's got to change how brain areas form. They have to adapt to it. That's another whole story for this. But let me answer your other question. Okay, how they controlled the populace. I can't speak for the ancient times, but we know it was the path of souls. The path of souls ritual was probably brought into the Americas by the Adena people, whoever they were, around 2000 BC. And a lot of the iconography that I show on all of those artifacts that I post routinely on Twitter, that iconography is all part of this. And that, it's believed by the mainstream, these are not my ideas, the mainstream of archaeology will tell you that the populace came together for a couple reasons. One was that whoever the elite were, they had the knowledge of agriculture, that masses of people could come together. And when these large groups of people could come together, you could organize them into building projects like the Monk's Mound at Cahokia, which is 100 feet tall. By the way, it was taller than that. I'm not sure how tall Monk's Mound was originally. The earliest measurement I've seen on it was 107 feet, but it was already degraded. And Monk's Mound at that time had a base of 17 acres. That's what it covered. So it was a 10-story building covering 17 acres. By comparison, the Great Pyramid of Giza only covers 12 and a half, or just under 13 acres. Monk's Mound is bigger. Now, since Monk's Mound was first found, it has eroded. Its sides have sloped. They've had lots of issues with it. And right now they say it covers 14, maybe 14 and a half acres. But it kind of depends upon what you look up. So how do you get the population to engage in something where you're not just building Monk's Mound, but you're building another 120 acres or 120 mounds? You're making a city of 5 to 10 square miles there at Cahokia, and you're going to build a palisade wall made out of trees that have a diameter of about 2 to 3 feet apiece. You're going to cut those trees down, you're going to embed them vertically, and you're going to build a wall that extends for about 2 to 3 miles. How do you get a population to do that? And so agriculture is what mainstream tells us, along with the promise of an afterlife, or the promise of reincarnation, or what I'll call resurrection. Those are the promises in the Path of Souls journey. So anyway.
Do you think that the changing of our second chromosome, or the genome, the second genome, the Y chromosome, the worship gene is what they call it? Do you think that has some aspect with this?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not. There's a lot that I can't speculate about.
Okay,
Or don't know.
Okay.
I do believe that there was, if Ancient Aliens has any kind of validity to it, I think the greatest validity is in genetic alteration. of the human genome. Maybe not just us. Maybe a lot of stuff was altered here, whether it was through panspermia and all the viruses and all of the DNA structures that we have constantly pummeling the earth, or whether it was something brought here directly either by, like remote drones technology. That's what Carl Sagan actually in 1963, the greatest skeptic of all time, Carl Sagan, in 63 said Earth has been visited at least 10,000 times by extraterrestrials.
Yeah, Carl Sagan had released some papers about pyramids and aliens, and it was very interesting.
Well, Sagan also didn't believe that UFOs were alien either. So there you go. I mean, what a contradiction. He thinks that he believed that if they came here, they probably did it by using some sort of remote technology. The word drone wasn't used then. We send space capsules all over, and we have some that just left the solar system. I think Voyager 1 just left the solar system, and it's remote technology.
It's its own sentient craft, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what Sagan said. He believed that they have been here.
That they are being they're being controlled by sentient craft, and that these are like autonomous beings. If we look at even back at the ancient days with the automatons and the way that these Vermana were used, this isn't just anything new. These aspects of reality are very old, and we are against a hybrid sky elite. They're in the sky. They're controlling technology. Even the Sumerian tablets kind of make reference to that. Billy Carson's been running the rounds, and he's dropping fire. Like this is I guess what we're up against with the free energy technologies, and I know people like Randall Carlson are saying that we have these technologies available to us, and that there's a force against us that's constantly controlling things, manipulating us. That's another topic for another day. But let's go ahead and get back to what we got going on right here, man. You got a lot of work that I want to talk about. So let's bring this back. Plasma beings. Do you think that they're everywhere around us? Right now we're interacting with multiple dimensions, and that there are these. You made mention to the little people earlier.
Yeah.
Is this a reference to like a biblical understanding of cherubs and these little small angels?
It may be something similar. The difference that I have with that, I don't think a cherub or an angel. Are there instances that you're aware of in the Bible when they might have lied to somebody? I don't know of any.
Fallen angels might have,
Well, a fallen angel would, but I don't know of any instances in the Bible where there's a clear deception. The angel came and told us this, but deceived us. I know deception occurs with, demons, which, maybe fallen angels, but I don't know of any reference in the Bible that way. But I do believe that, yes, I don't know that they're here around us all the time. I believe that for them to become sentient as we are at this minute, they need to form into a coherent entity. We generally cannot see them, particularly in the daytime. They can't be seen because they're not in visible light. The only way they can get into visible light is to begin pulling in physical matter, which they do. Physics calls it a dusty plasma. That's their actual term, because they say the first thing it does, pulls in dust. There's dust everywhere. So it's in the air everywhere. So they pull dust in and they condense into something that becomes physical. And again, physicists say we just need to give them enough energy to last long enough to see what they evolve into.
Could it be this is a real thing? Could it be the AIs and what we're seeing these days? When we look back at how Google first started AI, they referenced that it was the creation of a golem, which is this like sentient being inside a physical body, this outer plasmic, whatever it could be. It could be some other entity from a plasma spirit, but they're putting it into a physical body. Is that what you think? I like to think that right now, with this AI, it's a very serious topic where we don't know what we're dealing with.
Oh, I don't think we know either. I don't think we know what we're dealing with. I play with Twitter's or Elon Musk Grok a little now and then. It's kind of interesting, but I don't think we have any idea what we're about to get ourselves into. It's almost like plastics to me, you know. I'm old enough. I remember when we first started using them, and it was wonderful, wonderful. Plastics changed everything, and but we didn't have any idea what we were doing to ourselves, and I don't know if we have any idea what we're doing with ourselves. And that's the way we are. That's the way we humans appear to be. We you know, we'll test things and push it. Let's see what happens with this. You know, it's the old joke. Give me a hammer. I think this bomb's a dud. It's a stupid statement, but I've heard that many times. We do a lot of stupid stuff. So I don't know. And I can't answer your question about if they move in us. I know we interact with this. I know we interact with plasma fields. I've tried to teach people a little about that at mound sites. And the best way to interact with it is not to be around a lot of electromagnetic energy, to get as settled as you can. And the weird thing about this is that you interact with it mostly when the ambient electromagnetic field is that of Earth's Schumann resonance. And when you can reach that point, and in your body, you reach that point, the brain produces an electromagnetic field. That is what an EEG, an electroencephalograph, tests. It is looking at the electromagnetic fields in the brain, different areas of the brain. So to get yourself to the Schumann resonance, you basically relax. You don't have to close your eyes, but you have to really relax, do a little bit of, you know, controlled deep breathing. You don't need to meditate, but it's right before consciousness and real meditation. It's that state. That's when you hit the Schumann resonance. And that's the point where you most interact with it. Out here, it's like in Yakima or in Washington State. I know you're in Washington State. So at Yakima, the Yakima sightings that occurred, the UFO sightings, the lights in the sky, even the weird reports. Yakima had decades of reports. Yeah, Greg Long's book there. I've written tons about it myself. Great. It's a great book. Scientists have looked at this, and what they have found is that these UFOs that appeared in Yakima, and when I say Yakima, I'm talking about the reservation.
Right around my area, everybody.
Yep.
So
The
all
Yakima
of you
Indian
who are listening
Reservation.
right here, right, just 30 minutes
Cool.
away from us, guys.
All right. So there's a place there called Toppenish Ridge. Toppenish Ridge has roughly 100 fault lines. You can literally see those fault lines on the ridge. At the base of the ridge is an orchard. And at the base of the ridge, there's a few houses. There used to be more. That's where all the weird stuff happened. People actually would see balls of light forming at the top of Toppenish Ridge, and then they would watch them tumbling down the ridge, coming down the ridge, following a fault line, and then they would get weird. They would become like a Bigfoot. I know it sounds weird. I'm just telling you the reports. People would see a Bigfoot. They would pick up the same smells associated with Bigfoot, which is often rotten eggs. There would be electrical interference with tractors, automobiles in the area, radios in the area. People saw beings that looked like they had on scuba dive suits. You know, they look like they had on a wetsuit with something over their head. They look like they were scuba diving or something. Beings like that. And there's not just 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 of these reports. There are dozens. I would guess way over 100, but I know there's dozens because I put about a dozen in the book that Andrew and I did several years ago. So so all the Toppenish Ridge stuff happened before Mount St. Helens erupted. And during that time period, there was huge tectonic stress building up. Tectonic stress is where you have a fault line. and then it's pressure. The two sides of the fault line are pushing and almost grinding together. And that produces electricity, and it produces plasmas. The electricity produced, it's called the piezoelectric effect, which is what happens when you take a crystal. I used to do this in demonstrations. I'd take 2 quartz crystals, have to turn out all the lights. I wear gloves when I do this, by the way, in case anybody out there wants to do this, wear gloves. But the bigger the quartz crystals are, the better. It has to be total darkness. And you just take them and you rub them together like this. Rub them together as hard as you can. If you want a really spectacular show, fill a bathtub up about halfway with water, put those crystals under the water, and do the same thing underwater. You can light up the bathroom with it. You will literally light up the bathroom. And it's from the piezoelectric effect. And you will see, if you do, we did slow motion camera video, night vision on it, up real close when I did this. And you can literally see little balls of light flying out. And those are plasmas. And that is the, I'll call it a trick that some medicine men and shaman would do. They would have
ancient practice.
Pardon?
This is an ancient practice.
An ancient practice. They would take a leather pouch. They'd have a leather pouch. And inside that leathered pouch, they would have a lot of quartz crystal pieces. And then they would be inside somewhere in total darkness, and they'd grind this pouch. And as they grind this pouch, little balls of light would fly out. And those are like mini plasmas. So let's take this back now to Toppenish Ridge at the Yakima Tribal Reservation. So what was happening there, what they believe was happening, that as the 2 sides of the fault line that was there were pushing together, it was producing so much electricity that plasmas were being produced. But they didn't act like, just like a ball of electricity, what we might expect. They interacted with people. People at a distance, when they saw them, when they would like shine a flashlight at them, the object would respond back to them. It's as if they were being played with. In fact, that's what the researchers said. It's as if they're trying to interact with us, but they're playing with us. The exact same thing occurred when a physics department from the University of Southeastern Missouri, best called SEMO, in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, did a 7-year study in the Piedmont area of Missouri in the late 1980s during a UFO flap that occurred. I mean, there were thousands of reports that came there. The physics department there documented dozens and dozens of cases that they saw with their equipment. They actually set up roughly 600 observation points where they watched this. And what they summarized it is, what we're viewing here is some sort of a plasma, and it's interacting with us. It is responding to us. In fact, it was so weird that the plasmas became aware of the researchers and followed them home. The chairman of the physics department of Southeastern Missouri State University said that these plasmas followed him up and down the halls of the physics department on the university campus. They came to his backyard during parties. Now, my wife is from that area. Her family is from there. So that gave me the ability to interview a whole lot of people who were involved in all this research in Missouri. And what I found is lots of people interacted with these, and they saw things. Here's a bizarre example. The chairman of the physics department again saw this. His name was Harley Rutledge, PhD in physics. Rutledge said that he was having a party in his backyard in Cape Girardeau, which was near the Mississippi River, and he watched as a giant object just slowly went right over his backyard in the sky. It looked like a bullet. The size of it, I don't remember his exact statement, but it was several hundred feet long. So this thing was big, and it just moved straight across, and all the people there saw it. Nobody knew what to think of it. Since then, I found a bank president and a wife who happened to be out that night at a party the night that Rutledge saw this, and they saw the same thing, but they saw it in New Madrid, Missouri, which is about 40 miles down the road from there. New Madrid was also a place where a lot of UFOs were seen during this flat. And then I interviewed a basketball team and a number of the players that saw these, and they saw more traditional flying saucer objects. What is all this? I believe it's all plasmas. I think what the flying saucers that people see that have the revolving lights on them, the portholes on them, I believe it's all a plasma phenomenon, which doesn't really, I'm not discounting at all by saying that. In fact, it's more incredible than alien. These are sentient beings. They have some purpose that we don't quite understand and probably never will. They have an intelligence we don't understand. And I think they don't understand us too. I know that's weird. I think they simply are here interacting with us. And there might be some other force that has set all this up. I don't really know. But I'm not sure that they are as...
Do you think they could possibly be tapping into the 0-point field? Simon Hine likes to think that you know, what we think of as Bigfoots and these other, you know, UFOs and everything.
Yeah,
They
entities.
yeah,
Right.
they can tap into this 0-point field that's around us. You know, that's possibly how Bermuda Triangle is, you know, this. I mean, Bermuda Triangle. It's under this. I don't even know whether it's actual technology or electromagnetic pressure. But you know, these entities can tap into like what we...
Let's talk about the Bermuda Triangle in a minute. You know that we worked in that, didn't you?
I
We
have
did it.
zero clue.
Okay, we did a series of we did documentaries with National Geographic and History Channel, specifically on the Bermuda Triangle because
Someone's been in there. You've been in there?
Oh yeah, yeah. We found 31 crashed planes,
Whoa!
and a lot of this we can get to in a minute. But yeah, we spent 10 years, 25 weeks over 10 years, about 2.5 weeks per year in the so-called Bermuda Triangle, in the heart of it. It wasn't initially for that, but we started finding ships and planes because we were searching areas where people don't search, and we got our own boat. It's a very long, involved story. We interviewed a whole bunch of people that had weird experiences there. We had our own weird experiences there. Quite a few. We saw a lot of weird lights in the sky, lights in the water. But like I say, we found 31 crashed planes. 3 of those are on the official Bermuda Triangle list of planes that no one had ever been able to find. But that stuff's on. That stuff was, again, a lot of that we had with National Geographic and with the History Channel. There is something weird about it. This area, magnetic compasses do have issues there. I can tell you this too. When we first started doing our expeditions there, we took satellite phones along because when you get into areas there are no planes that fly overhead. We were in the area of Andros Island where most of the weird reports occurred. And South Andros is in Cuban airspace. And the Cubans were shooting down American planes up to 1978. Most people don't know that. You can't fly into Cuban airspace. We did, but we flew below radar because we started by doing aerial surveys to find things. And we found a whole bunch of stuff like that. The statute of limitations is passed on that, by the way. Anyway,
then they went all Barry Seal on us, right?
yeah. But anyway, okay. So, God, where was I going with that?
Atlantis. No, I'm playing the Bermuda Triangle. I think it might be related to Atlantis a little bit.
Well, that's how we initially started this. It was a search for Atlantis project with the Edgar Cayce organization. We were not going to go to Bimini. We didn't get to Bimini till we'd already made 4 weeks of trips down there, and then realized, shoot, we got to go to Bimini to see if what we found is related to the Bimini Wall or Bimini Road, whatever you want to call it. That's the only reason we went to Bimini. And then we started searching everywhere there. And like I say, we got our own boat because a lot of this stuff's in really shallow areas. But there's stuff everywhere there. We found a train. We found trucks, automobiles, piles of appliances. It's kind of weird seeing a pickup truck.
You said you found trains and trucks
Yeah.
in the Bermuda Triangle. And
Yeah.
how many miles out is this from land?
From Miami, where most of these where we found most of the vehicles, like the trains and the vehicles, trucks, cars. We probably found six trucks and cars. We found lots of weird things. Some bombs. We found a few bombs while we were there.
Bombs?
Unexploded bombs. Yeah, B-O-M, not bongs,
Bongs,
bombs. I'm sure there's bongs there too, but we found bombs underwater. And lots of stuff like that. How far away is it? Well, from Miami, if you went by boat, it'd be about 120 miles. But if you go to Bimini, it'd be about 100. From Andros, they're closer to Andros. It's the biggest of the Bahamas Islands, and most people have never heard of Andros because it's not a tourist destination. It's never been. There are some Germans that live there, and there are a few boating places on one side, but it has 7 secret bases that the U.S. Navy and the British Navy have, and we've been on one of those.
Is it like the nuclear bases over here?
They are submarine bases that were built there. You're not old enough to remember a lot of the Cold War, but during the Cold War,
I've heard it a little bit.
I know. Well, the Soviet Union had destroyers and submarines all over in the Gulf of Mexico and in Cuba. And so in response, the U.S. built all these bases on Andros Island. There were 7 of them. We actually were filming near one of the bases that was with the National Geographic. And they had my wife and I sitting on this fallen tree right on the beach where you could see the ocean behind us. And then we're doing this interview with them, and my wife and I aren't looking at the ocean, but the cameraman and the guy filming us, the guy who was asking the questions was, and they both went like this when we were talking. And then we heard this and we turned around, and a submarine had just come almost totally vertically up out of what's called the tongue of the ocean, only 100 to 150 yards off where we were, because that's where it gets deep. And then went kabam back into the water and then submerged in a few moments. That was very weird. We found all kinds of military objects, spheres, giant spheres. I believe all of the spheres are used for radar or sonar. Sorry, they're sonar buoys. We found what looked like torpedoes, all kinds of stuff there. But because of those bases, at least that's what we're told by them, because of those bases, satellite phones are blocked there. So you can't use a satellite phone. So you see no other boats out there. There's nobody out there. There's no fishermen out there. There's nobody living anywhere close. There is no help. You can't reach anybody by radio, meaning you are on your own. And on that other side of Andros, where all this stuff is, at low tide, you can walk 5 miles into the ocean. Let me say that again. At low tide, off of southern Andros Island, you can walk 5 miles into the ocean and not be over your head.
So there's some tunnel systems in there. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, there's lots of tunnels at Andros and caves. Yeah, we were all over them there. We've been in a lot of them. I hyperextended a knee crawling through a tunnel tube in this place, going in and got into what looked like this giant beehive. And I'm telling stories now. I've never told these stories before. So stop me if you need me to. If you need,
no, go for it, man.
But I crawled through this little tiny space, just big enough, this hole, just big enough for me to get to. And I can't recall ever doing that before. And that's when I hyperextended my knee and wound up limping the rest of the week. But got into this. It was like a beehive, a gigantic beehive. I don't know how tall it was, 20 or 30 feet, almost like a like a cathedral room or something. Very strange. I didn't see any human stuff in there. I had been told, though, that from that area, the reason I crawled in is they said that some years ago they had pulled a number of pottery pieces and 2 canoes, ancient canoes, out of that cave. That's why I crawled into it. And these can be hard to find. You have to get locals to tell you where this stuff is. And they won't tell most people. You have to go ahead. Sorry.
When we look at ancient cities like Kuyu, we can see that like civilizations have had crazy cave networks and ability to create cities underneath us. I'm looking at this and I'm asking let's flip this over to Edgar Cayce. You had mentioned Edgar Cayce. Can you talk about your research, because that can be a whole show itself, I believe, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what did you find over in the Bimini?
Well, we started at we didn't start at Bimini. We started at Andros. It was actually Andrew Collins that got us to do that, because I don't know if I could find it right now or not to show you. Maybe not. I doubt it. Andrew, I first met Andrew in the year 2001 and brought him to the ARE to speak. At the time, in 2001, my wife and I were co-editors of an ARE, or Edgar Cayce organization, publication called Ancient Mysteries. And we also assisted with the Ancient Mysteries conference and picking out who we could get to come and talk. And we set up a number of other conferences there. And I discovered this guy, Andrew Collins, then. That's when I found Andrew Collins. Arranged for him to come over to the U.S. and talk on it. We became friends immediately. It's a long story, but anyway, we've been friends since. During his talk, Andrew showed a picture, two photos in black and white taken in 1968, and they were taken by ARE members. And in one of the pictures, it shows, I'm going to have to show this by hand, it shows what looks like the letter E, the cursive letter E. So it's underwater. So when you're flying over this thing and you look down on the water, you see there's a letter E there. It looks like E. So what is it? Nobody knows. And then he showed another picture that was taken from a plane. And in that picture, it is a huge underwater circle, a perfectly white circle that has what looks like 3 concentric rings of standing stone. Let me say that again. A underwater circle, perfect circle, that has 3 rings of stone around it in shallow water off of Andros Island. And as Andrew's telling this story, I vividly recall turning to my wife saying, "Why hasn't anybody found that? Let's go find that." That's how it started, right there. I just decided, here we were visiting mound sites. We had been to we've been to the Yucatan many times, in Egypt and other, like, lots of places. And I just thought, let's just go down and find this. So that's how it started. And let's also find the E. Let's go find the E and see what it is. That was the very beginning of the ARE Search for Atlantis project. So we figured out how to get to Andros. I'm very good at logistics. I worked out the logistics of getting there, how to find it. The hardest part of it is nobody will take you to Western Andros. Let me say that again. You can't hire somebody to get you to Western Andros. Nobody will do it because it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no help. There's no gas. There's no radio that works. There's nothing. So we wound up we found a sponge diver, a guy that had a little tiny boat with an engine. I think it was 25 horsepower. It was a 4-hour ride. We had to cut through Andros Island itself. They're called bights. You can only go through at high tide to get there. No one else would do it. In fact, when we told people we were doing this, they said, "You're crazy. Don't go over there." They said, "Do you understand what will happen if your boat breaks down, your engine does?" And while we went there, while we were going over, the guy actually taught me how to clean sand out of an outboard engine. I didn't know how to do it. I'd been boating for years, but not like this, because we literally were in water that was a foot deep. A foot, that was it. So that's why nobody goes over there. You have to find a boat that can stand a foot, that can be in water that's only a foot deep.
Might as well just walk that, right?
No, it's about a 45-mile walk through marl, a different kind of mud, which is almost like quicksand. I did a video. There's a video of me at Andros that's on a YouTube channel. It lasts about 4 minutes, and I'm standing in that marl. It looks like white paste. It's pure white, and when you stand in it, you just sink. You'll sink, and you just keep sinking.
That's deadly.
It may be. I don't know how. I kept pulling out. I was doing an interview while I was in it, so I had to pull myself out of it and keep talking. But you don't want to walk through this stuff. So you can't just walk to the other side of Andros and find your way. And we saw sharks running through these bights. And a bight it's kind of like a river. It's like a high tide river. And it cuts the island into thirds. There's several of these that cut through Andros. But nobody's there. You don't see anybody there. So there's no help. So we got to the first site because we started by flying over. I said nobody had ever been to it. Why? I found out that an archaeologist had spent $30,000 in an aerial survey flying all over Andros trying to find these circles and E. Couldn't find them. I talked to him at length. He was a friend. I talked to some of the other people at length. I talked to a guy that claimed that he said, yeah, I made a video of it. I videoed it from the air. And I said, I need to see your video. He sent it to me. And what he did is he held the picture that was taken in 1968 up. And then they had the video camera that kind of moved across the picture that he took of those. And that was his video. And I said, well, you've been there. Where is it? And he said, no, I haven't been there. I don't know anybody that's been there. So I found the pilot that took the picture. And nobody ever talked to the pilot about it. Before we ever went to Andros to find this thing, we went to the pilot's house.
Are they using LiDAR?
We weren't using LiDAR at the time, no. I'd love to see LiDAR of Andros Island, but that's another story. And you can't, LiDAR doesn't do anything with the water there. It won't help you with the ocean, not to my knowledge. You got to use, we have used a lot of side scan sonar. We got our own. We had 3 side scan sonars we used regularly. Anyway, we had magnetometer. But going back to this, so the guy, we did the interview with him, and he said, yeah, we actually saw 2 circles. And I said, has anybody ever asked you about it? He said, I've seen people talk about this all over the place, but he said, nobody has ever contacted me or asked me where it was. And I said, they're flying all over the place. They think it's in Andros or on the other side. And I said, can you remember where it was? He said, sure, I've marked it. He went to the back. He got an aerial map of that area. He came out and he marked the spot. He said, it's right here. And he said, the other one is right above it, right here. And he put the little X's on it. And he said, yeah, it's in Cuban airspace. It's in southern Andros, and you can see the Cuban airspace marks on it. And so I talked to a charter pilot that had a small twin engine. It's called a Norman Islander. And you can fly I had a private pilot's license, still do, but I'm not active in it anymore. So I talked to the guy and showed him where it was. And he said, man, I'd love to do that. He said, Cuban airspace, I don't care. He said, I've never been down there. I'd love to go and look for this thing. So we did. We found both of the circles from the air, found them both, and that enabled us to get the exact GPS. And at the time, what we did is we flew directly over them. We'd record the GPS on a camera off the pilot's GPS. Off the plane's GPS. And then we found the E in the north. It didn't take long. We had to fly around in circles and circles. It's about 100 miles away from where these others are, where the circles are. But we found the E, and we took a GPS there. So we got to this site. We found loads and loads of other circles along the way. We saw a lot of weird stuff along the way that we really couldn't explain. Saw lots of sharks, lots of other things. When we got to this circle, the first circle, it was 250 feet in diameter. That was the smaller one. Couldn't tell what formed it, although we know what formed it. There's a little small coral head right in the middle of it, and the coral head wasn't very tall. It was maybe 6 to 8 inches tall. And then the circle forms around it. I won't get into that yet. And then we went further south and we got to the gigantic one, which was 1,000 feet in diameter, which was what the pilots originally estimated it as in 1968.
1,000 feet in diameter. That's pretty.
1,000 feet circle in diameter, which is basically what a lot of the earthworks in North America, the Mounds earthworks that are the huge circles, a lot of them are 1,050 feet in diameter. Kind of weird. It's the first time I've ever thought of that, but that's true. Anyway, they weren't standing stones. They weren't standing stones. You want to guess what we found? They look just exactly like standing stones at low tide because they're sticking out of the water. What they are, they're sponge. Natural sponge. And just one of those is worth thousands of dollars. Because remember I told you we had a sponge diver take us over on his little boat.
Kind of like coral then.
Well, no, sponge, like, natural sponge is extremely expensive. And if you can go to a store and buy a natural sponge, one about that size might set you back $40 or $50. And sponge divers collect those. It's a living organism. They pull those out. They collect them. We saw the whole process while we were there. A lot of stories about it that I could tell, but I won't. Anyway.
1,000-foot sponge?
No, there's
500
standing up like there's loads of them creating
100,000.
Yeah, triple like this 1,000 foot.
I thought you said 1,000-foot sponge.
Well, the number of sponge there's tens of thousands of sponge.
Okay,
it's just the big ones around this circle are so large that when it's low tide and the tide drops 3, 4, 5 feet, they're sticking out of the water, and even up close, standing right next to them, they look like rocks, but they're sponge. Now, the question is, why did they form into this circular pattern? And I didn't know at the time, but our Bahamian guy, a lot younger than us, and what he does is he collects sponge. That's what he does. He's a sponge collector. He actually did a drawing on the beach for us and explained it to us that day, and I filmed it. It's in one of the documentaries that we made, and he used the stick and he drew a circle, and he said it starts out as a small coral head. Coral is a living entity. So when you get coral, what happens then is you get a lot of small fish feeding. And then larger fish come to feed on the smaller fish. And crustaceans like shrimp moving.
It's the whole life cycle.
Oh, yeah. Lobster all over, shrimp, lobster all over the place.
The small fish find a home in the coral.
Yes, as do the shrimp and the lobster. And the way he said it is they clean their homes. He said they have a home and they push it out and they push it out and it goes in a circle. And the fish start swimming around in a circle. And we actually saw this occurring. And they go around and around and around. And the bigger it gets, to where you get perfect white sand on the bottom. And where it ends, there's little pieces of rock or other coral out there. And sponge can't grow in sand. It has to have rock or coral to grow on. So that was it. That's what he explained. And then that night in the hotel I called a hotel, in the place where we were staying on Andros at the time, they had some reading books. And one they had was one on Bahamas marine biology. And in it had that exact explanation. And that was going to be it. We went up later and we saw the E. We took a second trip back and we found the E. The E was a coral head that was very bizarre, and it had what's called turtle grass growing in it. And the turtle grass just oddly looked like an E. It's still there. We saw a Z in the water. There was a Z. There was a W. There's all kinds of other letters, but they're all natural. There's a lot of squiggles and so on too. But that was it. That's all we were going to do. That ended the project we were going to do. And the night that my wife and I were getting ready to fly back, we were flying back early the next morning. The charter was coming to pick us up. There was a violent thunderstorm outside. We had the TV on. We were both tired. And there was a knock at the door. And a guy came to talk to us, a local one-time dive operator, and he was convinced, as everybody else was, that these are treasure hunters. And the reason that he's convinced of that is that's all anybody does. People that come down there and say, hey, will you take us out? We want to look at this stuff out here. We're looking. Everybody's treasure hunting. They think that's what everybody wants. And we told him no. And we actually had files that had all the pictures of this stuff in it, of everything that had been found there. And he said, well, I want to tell you something then. He said, there is a formation here not far from where we were in Andros. And he said that there's a structure, an underwater structure that got uncovered about 5 years ago. And he said, I don't know anybody else that knows about it but me. And he said, it looks a lot like the Bimini Road, but it's bigger. That was his quote. And that's on a film that we did also. And
might it be like the Road of Gibraltar from the Atlantis, or
the Bimini Road, Bimini Wall, is a structure of stones. I don't know about the Gibraltar one, but I can tell you, he said the one at Andros was bigger. But he said, I've never dove it. I don't know. He said, but it's there. And he told me how to get to it. He said, what should you go there and just go straight out. Go straight out. So the next morning, about 6 a.m., my wife and I walked from the hotel. Call it a hotel. It's not a hotel. But anyway, we walked from there to the beach at this area. My wife had stayed on shore and filmed me. And then I snorkeled out. And at first, I didn't find anything. I snorkeled maybe 200 to 300 yards out. And it gets really deep at this part of Andros. But it's pretty clear there was a fairly shallow, and then it gets deep, and then whatever. And I figured, all right, it's not there. So I said, all right, I walked to somewhere else, a slightly different area, and went straight out. And there it was. I had a cheap throwaway camera at the time, an underwater throwaway camera, which is all we took with us initially. We didn't have underwater film that we did at that time. We did have out of water film, but not underwater. And I took 3 or 4 photos, and I tried to break a piece off to see what it was. I had a stainless steel dive knife, so I dove down to it, and it just snapped it. I had just snapped it off. And so I got out of the water. My wife did a little interview with me. I told her that it had 3 tiers. These blocks were gigantic stone that looked man-made, carved, whatever, that it looked real. But we had to fly back. It was too late to call the charter and cancel it. And we needed to find somebody that would get us out there, and we had to get the scuba tanks and everything. So we started making trips back again and again and again for the ARE Search for Atlantis project. And again, that was before we ever went to Bimini. And it was incredible. This structure is just incredible. We called it the Andros Platform. It's about 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet long. It's 150 feet wide. It has 3 tiers of stone that are separated. We did side scan sonar of it and filmed the sonar when we did it. We scuba dived the whole thing. We measured a lot of it. We got pieces of it to test and so on.
So these are circular structures, right?
Well, this one isn't circular. It's like a J shape almost, similar to the Bimini Road. And it's like a big J. This one's like a big J. I know you can't see my hands all the way, but it's like a J shape or a hook shape, big hook shape. And the hook is where the harbor would have been. It's like a protective area to go in, where your boat can pull up and you can unload cargo. So these are it's a cargo platform. So it got a lot of notice. The Andros platform got a lot of notice. We issued a press release, and then we just got overwhelmed. That's when I believe it was Discovery came to us. We did a documentary on Discovery, and that's the first time we went to the Bimini Road. Was with Discovery, and David Childress was along on that. I filmed David, and that's when I first got to meet David, and that was like 2003 or so, or 2002. So Discovery, then the Travel Channel, then National Geographic, and then the History Channel, and then NBC. We did one with NBC there, and also in a lot of other places. But that's really what started it all. So at Bimini, let's since I'm on just talking
Um,
about what we found in this.
So by
We
this
found,
time, is this before or after American Mount the Mounds in America research?
the date on this, the dates on both the Bimini Road and the Andros platform, we think they were being actively used approximately 3 to 5,000 BC.
Uh,
3 to 5,000 BC. The top of them would have been above sea level. All right. So the sea levels at that time, the sea levels starting in 10,000 BC were going up, but they didn't
right.
reach their current level till thousands of years later. And in 3000 BC, the sea levels were roughly 20 to 25 feet lower than they are today. So it's risen that much in that amount of time, and they continue to rise. The sea levels have been rising the past 11,000 years.
Right.
It's slowing down now. I mean, despite what you hear about climate change and so on, the rise in sea level is slower than it was. I mean, it's still going to go up, and I'm not saying it doesn't have anything to do with climate change, but it has been rising routinely for a long, long time. So that's the date, and that's also the date of the carbon dating from the Bimini Road. The Bimini Road stones are made out of carbonate beach rock. And you'll hear all the time, oh, you can't carbon date stone. Well, you can't carbon date granite. That's true. You can't carbon date schist. That's true. But you can carbon date carbonate beach rock. And the reason is it's got carbon in it. And it's formed from living entities. Living entities have died and been fused in to that carbonate. And a lot of it is just shell. Seashells. Beach rock forms on a beach. That's how it gets its name, but it's naturally forming limestone. We've seen a lot of it. So the beach rock that has made, I hate using the term because it's all, what stone isn't natural? All stone is natural stone. Beach rock is natural stone too. So the Bimini Road is made out of beach rock, and it dates to about 3 to 4,000 BC. In all the and there's like 5 carbon dates been taken of the beach rock on the Bimini Road. Hopefully, I answered that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the rock from the early in 1900s. The guy in Florida who's using who built the Coral Castle.
Yep, been to Coral Castle too. I don't know of anybody that's ever. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
I'd say I don't know anybody that has tried to carbon date any of the material from Coral Castle. Coral Castle is definitely an interesting place. You ever go down there, it's worth a stop, folks. If you drive down to the Keys from Miami, you're going to pass Coral Castle. Stop in and have a look at it.
Who would you think would be here at the Andros the islands? What civilization or cultures or?
Well, Edgar Cayce said all that was part of Atlantis. Of course, Cayce's Atlantis was huge. Cayce's Atlantis was really a massive empire of islands that began basically at Gibraltar. And there was an island right off of Gibraltar called Spartel. Spartel went underwater around 11,000 BC or so. And so from there, Cayce said that Atlantis had all of these islands, and it went from there all the way over, and it went to the islands in the Caribbean. All of them were a part of it. Florida was a part of it. The Yucatan was part of it, and part of South America was part of it. All of that was the empire of Atlantis, and he said that it did have a main island, which he called Poseidia, and that it had a center city. He never described the center city like Plato did. Plato described the center city of Atlantis was only 1.5 miles wide. Most people would, think it's huge, but it's not. The island, the main island of Atlantis, according to Plato, was 340 miles long by about 200 miles wide. And there are two places that would match that perfectly in the Caribbean. One of those is Cuba. And that was Andrew Collins. Andrew Collins' book on Atlantis cited Cuba as the main island of Atlantis. And the other one was what would have been Andros Island in the Bahamas in 10,000 BC. It was the same size because, like I told you, at Andros, in some places you can walk 5 miles into the ocean at low tide and you're not underwater. It was an enormous island at the time, and it was about the same size. And Edgar Cayce never said the Bahamas was Atlantis. He said that a temple of the Poseidians, one of the 3 Hall of Records that Cayce mentioned in his readings, the Hall of Records, one of those 3 was in this temple of the Poseidians, and it was south of Bimini. And he said that if a geological survey was made to the south of Bimini, it might be found. And he said, expect this portion of Atlantis to rise again, this portion of Atlantis, not Atlantis, but this portion of it to rise again in 1968 or 1969. And he said that in, I believe it was 1934 or 36 when he made that statement.
Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, he also was one of the people who predicted the Sphinx and the library underneath there.
Yeah, that's the Hall of Records. The
Yeah,
main Hall of Records. That's the
you
one.
have a lot of
everybody
research
said.
on him.
Do I have a lot on Cayce?
Yeah, you have a lot of research on Edgar Cayce.
Yeah, I wrote, co-authored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
But you're working with that.
About 8. I think I co-authored 8 books. We are life members of the ARE. We ran the Search for Atlantis project with them. My wife was the chair of the ARE's board of directors for years and was on the board as a member from years before that. So yeah, we have quite a connection with it.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about Edgar Cayce on his own specific episode another time. But let's talk about Atlantis. So this Atlantis, it's speculated to be part of this ancient culture that we're kind of talking about, maybe throughout time and being here on Earth. You know, whether it be 10,000 years ago, what we're seeing in the mainlands too. We see that there's like I mentioned earlier. There is this battle, you know, of good versus evil, dark versus light, and there's these cultures. And Atlantis was, people like to say it's mythology, but I believe it's 100% real. And I think that the reason the Atlantic Ocean is named the Atlantic Ocean is because of Atlantis.
Yeah, very possible. Yeah, absolutely. The reason I got into mounds, partly, I mean, we did a book on Edgar Cayce and what he said about Indian mounds. Cayce said that it was remnants of the Atlanteans involved in mound building. Now, I don't put any of that in my mainstream books in archaeology.
So what type of artifacts have you found? This had kind of all started with me seeing some interesting artifacts on Twitter over and over and over and over again for months, and I constantly repost them whenever I can, whenever I see them. Let's just go ahead and break it down. What type of, for all my viewers out there, for all the viewers out there, what type of artifacts, and why should we be highlighting this? What are some of the odd things, and what are some very important things about these artifacts?
Well, there's a lot of weird artifacts, absolutely. But most of what I post are pottery with symbols. It's the symbols that matter.
Yes.
Although some of the pottery itself is absolutely bizarre. It's like, who in the world would make this? What would they make this for? You often think that when you see these. There are some that have 3 openings or 4 openings at the top, and they come up looking like a worm. And then the bottom is open. It's like, what, I can't figure out what this is for. But they have symbols on them. And it's not just pottery. I like the term gorget. I like to say gorgets because I'm not French, where I'd say gorget, Gorget, which is a symbolic object that would hang around your neck to show your status. So there are a lot of these gorgets. I'm using that term again, not gorget. There's a lot of these that have really weird symbols on them, like the eye and hand symbol. So you'd see a severed hand, and in the hand there'd be an eye, and what really looks like an eye in the palm. So that's very common. And that really was not known. Nobody knew. When I say nobody, it can't be nobody.
In middle school and high school, I told my friends I wanted a tattoo of an eye in my hand. I had no idea why.
Interesting. Well, it's the all-knowing eye, according, most philosophy about that is that it's a hamsa. Not the Native American was not a hamsa, but it's the all-seeing, all-knowing eye, and
And
it's the
I've had dreams of being like seen by giants. So
ah
like a lot of this mound stuff is very spiritual and
yeah.
mystical.
And by the way, we never finished the giant stuff. Casey talked about giants too, but we'll get back to that in a bit. Well, maybe a bit, or maybe next show.
Yeah, we'll be talking
Yeah,
for
we'll
a
do
while.
another one. But anyway, okay, so um, the artifacts, it's the symbols on them is the main thing. There are artifacts that show all kinds of strange things. Bird people. Some of them do, in fact, show giants. There are some of very big people with small people. That's true. Um, there are lots of creatures that are shown, mythological creatures. There are humans shown wearing all kinds of bizarre garb, looking like bird people, having giant nose, the hooked nose. It's a nose that comes way out and then ends in a giant hook. That relates to the Cahokian belief system that they believe that they manipulated the populace with. I use the term manipulated. They weren't manipulated. They willingly went along with the idea for whatever reason. Just like people willingly go along with, religions today. We choose to do that. So anyway, there are all these artifacts, millions of them, but the ones that you're seeing, and I'm not that interested in points, I will say that. Arrowheads. Okay, so a lot of people, they collect arrowheads. And not all arrowheads are arrowheads. Some of them are points. Some of them are various kinds of spades and diggers. You'd put them in like hoes, the ends of a hoe, because most of what they did was use stone tools. But
So a lot of these mound things were what type of material? Is it stone? There's no obsidian. This wasn't part
there's
of the
obsidian.
obsidian.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of obsidian artifacts, lots of stone artifacts, lots
Or
of black obsidian, lots of flint. There's flint mines all over the place. In that place I told you about in West Virginia, where the
obsidian was used for
giants were found.
scrying, right? A
Sorry?
magician scrying. Obsidian was used for scrying sometime, right?
Oh, it was used. Yeah, anything that was glass-like was used for that. So some of the giant, I mentioned the 7 giants, 7 to 8 foot tall skeletons, which to us are giants, pulled out of those mounds in the Kanawha River Valley in West Virginia. In several of those, in the tombs, where the large figure was usually in the center, there were black flint spear points, lots of them, long black flint spear points. Well, Andrew Collins and my wife and I, along with some county officials in that county, walked up a mountain. It's called Mount Armstrong at Mount Carbon. Mount Carbon. Mount Armstrong is the name of the mountain. The town at the base of it is called Mount Carbon, which is very confusing. But that is where the flint workshops were and the flint mines. We walked up that. It took us 4.5 hours to hike up that mountain to see all these flint mines. And it's a sacred area. It's an area where the Native Americans that were there when the first whites came in the 1800s, they knew about it, but they wouldn't go to it. They simply said it's a haunted area. And there was a lot of stuff up there. There was once a series of large stone towers found by the Smithsonian in the mid 1800s, illustrated by the Smithsonian publications in the late 1800s. Stone towers, lookout towers. There are also a lot of other lookout towers.
Like the ones in Arizona, Colorado, and all the
these look a lot like them. Yeah, there are still towers in Arizona, absolutely. And there's stories I could tell. Maybe I'll get to a couple stories where they, in Arizona, Frank Hibben found roughly 30 of those. They were packed full of bodies that had been killed, shot with arrows. Long and I've written articles about this. It's one of the coolest stories I've ever heard. Frank Hibben was a mainstream archaeologist who was told about all these towers in a very remote area in a box canyon. And I think there were 75 of them. And they still had the skeletal remains of the people in them that had been mummified, wearing their clothing, All the pottery was still in these towers, still intact. And they're called towers because the only way you can get in them is by a ladder or a rope, by going way up to the top and then descending the same way. And yeah, they were filled with bodies, dead bodies, people that had been killed. And they figured out what had happened. They had been attacked by someone, but they were shot with arrows. So they weren't, like the Spanish using guns or anything. They were some other tribal group that came in. Another story, lots of stories. But anyway, all right. So getting back to the black flint. So there are flint objects that you find. There are objects of shell. And these shells some of them are small, but others are whelk shells. And they made what are called dipping cups. And the dipping cups were huge. When they remove roughly 2/3 of it, so that 1/2 of the whelk cup is gone, it becomes like a dipper. You could dip it into the water. They're about 12 to 15 inches long. They're big. These things are huge. They all came from the Atlantic coast of Florida, and they even know where. These were found in these cups have actually been found in Spiro, Oklahoma. Yet they come from the Atlantic coast off of central Florida. It's a place called Mount I can't remember its name. It's a mound site. It'll pop into my mind in a minute. Been there several times. And how they got there, big trading networks. They found them also in Michigan and in Minnesota, in Illinois, in Indiana, Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Missouri, Mississippi. Whelk shells that have incredible incised carvings on them of these mythological characters, of birdmen, sky people, beings of all different kinds, and these still exist. There are many of those still in existence. Most of them are stored away, housed in museums somewhere, but you can see them, and I post photos of these all the time. I don't know how many there really are. I probably have photos of 50 of them. I'm not sure how many there really are, probably a lot more, but 50 that are intact that I've got photos of. So that's just an example. And they've taken some of those and they've made them into gorgets, giant gorgets this big around, and they're curved. So it's the curved interior of a whelk shell. And it's about as big as my hands are right now, showing you here. And so you'd look at the inside of the shell, and then they'd carve on the interior of the shell. Beautiful, beautiful designs. And then they put 2 holes at the top. A leather strap goes through and attaches it. And so that would be on the chest of some very important person, some elite member of the society. And it was a show of their status, but it was also used in the rituals. And then there's these little ritual objects about this tall that are containers. And on the containers are tiny, bigger than a thimble, but they're really small. And they have a symbol on them. And the symbol tells you what goes in, what the material was or the substance was that was put into those objects. And it's actually brilliant. And I'm using the words that a guy by the name of P.D. Newman told me. He's another author that writes in this. And P.D. said how brilliant it is for a culture that didn't have writing, where you could write the word, say, datura, D-A-T-U-R-A. You can't write that on an object. So what do you do with the object? Well, you make the object in the exact shape of the datura seed or the datura pod. So it looks like a big datura. And sometimes you put the symbol of it on the side of it. And that's what they did. And almost all of the modern art, the objects that we see in modern museums that came out of Mounds, they're not day-to-day use, day wear. They're not like the cups and saucers they used, although those have been found at some sites. The things that have these symbols on were found in the burials of the elite, and they have the most sacred symbols that tell us about their ultimate cosmology and their belief system. about how the universe started, the battle between good and evil. You know, you've mentioned many times the children of darkness, the children of light, and all that. A lot of that is Edgar Cayce stuff. The children of the law of one, or the children of light. Cayce said that the Native American tribe, the Iroquois, that's who they were. Cayce actually mentioned, Cayce said that the Atlanteans were not white. The Atlanteans were not Caucasian. They weren't yellow. They weren't any of those other races. They were the red race. The Native Americans were the Atlanteans, according to Edgar Cayce. And he said that before the main island of Atlantis was destroyed in 10,000 BC, or had its cataclysm, lots and lots of the Atlanteans fled to North America, the northeast of North America, and became the Iroquois. And the Iroquois were the most successful of the tribes. If people don't know this, the Cherokee are the Iroquois. The Cherokee are Iroquois tribes. So are the Seneca, the Oneota, and there's a whole bunch of them that are Iroquois. They just have their own tribal names. They have their own clans too. But the Cherokee were a very successful group of Iroquois who moved south because the Iroquois were way too successful and their population was getting too big. And rather than fight each other for land or space or for whatever, resources they had, they went to the south. And a lot of people just don't know that. They think they're a separate group, but they're not. Now, is Cayce right about that? I think that he is correct, that the Iroquois are partly the remnants of the Denisovans, because we know they also have Denisovan DNA. You may not know that. About 3% of Native American DNA is Denisovan DNA. And Native Americans also have a very high proportion of what's called haplogroup X. And it is a type of mitochondrial DNA. I've actually written books about this too, about mitochondrial DNA research, how it started. And haplogroup X got its name because they didn't really know where it came from, and it was unusual. But it was found with Native Americans, and it's still the only one of 30-some haplogroups of mitochondrial DNA that they don't have a source of. It's like wherever it came from, it's destroyed, it's gone. There's a whole bunch of things that point to something here going on with where these people migrated from, because everybody's migrated from somewhere. That's one way to put it. Everybody comes from somewhere, and they probably didn't just develop here. They came from somewhere. Cayce said they came from Atlantis, and Cayce also said there were people who migrated here in 10,000 BC across the Bering Straits, just like mainstream archaeology says. But he also said that people came from the South Pacific in 50,000 BC. And that was bizarre. And because we know now that people came from the South Pacific, they are still in South America. They are indigenous tribes. Their genetics don't match anybody but tribes in New Zealand and Australia. That's where they came from.
There are two countries that have been speculated that are in the Pacific. One is Lemuria, and then I think to the left of Australia, there's also another country that was in between India and that area. Very, very historic, like a Madagascar type of.
Yeah, that whole area, right. That whole area is where Cayce said they came from. And yeah, there's a lot of sunken land there. They have their own mythology. The same people probably wound up going to Hawaii, and not the Galapagos.
Yeah, I mean, like 10,000 years ago, the Hawaii was its own little.
It was bigger.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah, it was bigger. It wasn't a lot bigger, but a lot of land was bigger. I have maps showing how big things really were then, and like Indonesia. The area you were talking about that is to the east of Indonesia that's really more to the northeast. Indonesia is more to the northeast of Australia and New Zealand. Indonesia was a lot bigger than it is today. And Sundaland is a sunken. It's a sunken civilization there. How old it is, how long ago that it was prospering? I don't know, but that stuff's all over. And I think the oldest stuff is underwater. Mainstream archaeology has trouble with all that. They just do. And part of it is they're just not prepared to really do research underwater. I've talked to a lot of mainstream archaeologists, and the truth is there aren't that many. And one of them I talked to was and became friends with, was the chairman of an archaeology department. There's just no money. It takes a lot of money to do research on boats, a lot. And you have to have a lot of skills because it's very, very dangerous. Diving and doing excavation work at the same time is really dangerous. Particularly unless you are a skilled diver, and really skilled divers will use various mixtures, so they can stay under longer. But you can't just focus on doing an excavation. You have to look at those gauges a lot. You can't just be staring at excavation. It's dangerous. We had some close calls in our many, 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 many trips to the Bahamas, diving to 115 feet at one point for the History Channel. I felt pressured by the History Channel to do this dive. And we went to a series of structures found by an archaeologist by side scan sonar. And it's like 75 square and rectangular structures in pure white sand at 115 feet, right by the 10,000 BC shoreline, which was found and identified by Florida State University. So there's these structures, 3 structures on a line. They look like building foundations. And so we've been the only people who have ever dove it. It's about 5 miles off of Bimini. So it's about 4 miles to 4.5 miles further out from the Bimini Road at 115 feet. So we dove that, and there's enough air for a scuba diver like me to spend maybe 10 minutes on the bottom. But because of the way they were filming, they wanted us to go down slow. So that took a lot of my air. Normally, I just plunge straight to the bottom, get to the bottom as fast as possible.
That's right.
I have never had a problem. I've never had a problem clearing my ears. But some people have to stop, and you go through these conundrums to clear your ears. And then you go down a little more, and it takes them 5 to 10 minutes. And then on the bottom, we were... they were confused. I wanted to go straight to them to use our time. And you have to buddy up in this, and I couldn't get our buddy to even watch. And so I wound up spending 10 minutes, and all I could do was see 3 of these square rectangular formations, all of which are roughly 10 by 20 feet, square, rectangular. Have sides on them, look like stone foundations around them, and they're filled. They have sides on them where it's been like filled with sand, and then a lot of growth on them, and the stone on the side is all covered with coral, but they look like building foundations. And these 75 are in 3 rows that are they're 3 straight rows, and it's 1.5 miles long. So you have this 1.5 mile long stretch right at the 10,000 BC shoreline of 75 buildings arranged in 3 rows. And they look like they were a place where a boat would pull up and cargo. You'd move cargo. You'd store cargo, and you'd put cargo on a boat. That's what they look like. And it's the closest thing that we've ever found there that relates to Atlantis. Although... I keep throwing this out because there's so much to this. The very last thing was a collapsed temple. It's about 30 miles south of Bimini. It's not on an island. It's in water. It's in deep water on both sides, but it's on an elevated spot that goes up. and it's about 15 to 20 feet below the surface then. And this, it looks like a tsunami hit a stone temple or stone building and then threw it off. So it's a tear-shaped set of ruins, like a big teardrop. It is 640 feet long.
Jeez,
It's the size of a World War II aircraft carrier.
that's ridiculous.
So it's 640 feet long, 200 to 300 feet wide. And it's massive. It's a massive pile of stone beams, stone slabs.
Do these compare to the megalithic underwater structures in
Yes.
Japan?
Well, this is a real building. You know, the Japan one at Yonaguni. I believe the Yonaguni structure is man-made, but it's not a building. It's like a stone formation. This is actual remains of a building. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it is because the Bahamas declared it an archaeological site after we notified it and did all the things we had to do legally.
Nice work.
Yeah, well, we always did. We always did what we had to do legally in all this. So anyway, this thing also has fluted columns. You know, the fluted columns are the ones they hold up a roof. They're usually round, and then they have like the indentations going around them. That's what a flute is. You see those on Greek temples and Roman temples all the time. So this has fluted columns. Well, we actually tested the stone. It's schist. It's spelled schist. Schist. Okay. So schist, and we had several geological labs and 2 universities come up with what it was and where it was from, and they said it's from one of 2 places. It's either from Greece, from the same place where they got the schist that the Oracle of Delphi was made. The Oracle of Delphi is made of schist. People don't know this, but it's made of schist. Or it came from Norway. Norway has the same schist. Those are the options. And it's in the Bahamas. So it's gigantic. I mean, it's just I cannot describe how big some of this stuff is.
I do think that the legend of Talos is real when we look at Greece and we look at the automatron, that there were giant beings, that the robots that were helpers.
Well, Cayce talked about automatons too, that they made out of different. They were part human, part animal, but they were mainly workers. They didn't have they were supposedly soulless. They were almost like worker bees, according to Cayce. And they got more and more weird with the creation in them. And now that doesn't mean this was going on in 10,000 BC, because
and other things weren't similar.
Yeah. So, I mean, Plato's story of Atlantis started in 9600 BC with the destruction of it. Plato never talked about the beginning of Atlantis. We don't know when it started. We know its beginning, how Poseidon began it, and how he gave portions of it to his kids, and how he made the center city, but we don't have a dating on that. We don't have any idea. Cayce gave us some dates. He didn't say when Atlantis, well, he did say when Atlantis started. I take that back.
The Sumerian kings, this goes back, 400,000 years ago?
Yeah, but that again, that's not Plato talking about Atlantis.
Right. I mean, but we can see that there's civilizations that go back. That possibly go back.
Way back. Yeah. Well, Cayce said
so there's even, I believe Michael Cremo likes to think that some of these civilizations go back millions of years ago.
I can't say I disagree with that. I know there's no evidence right now. There's no evidence. Well, the closest thing we have evidence are some of the out of place artifacts.
I mean, but then we look at Mars, and that's where we might have came from, and I know Edgar Cayce talks about that too, right?
Cayce talks about us coming from doing soul journeys, and he does say we came from the stars. Yes, and we will return to the stars. Native Americans say the same thing.
Jesus says, this is not my home.
Yeah. So, and we're not going to stay here, that we go back. Now, Native Americans had a rather unique belief system in this, but it's very similar to what Cayce said. But Cayce said Atlantis started in roughly 215,000 BC or 220,000, and it began in a place that already had people, but it began with a new genetic version of humans. That's how it began. There was a new genetic human.
Adam.
Yes, exactly. That was the new, which he called, oh God, I want to say Amelia,
of man.
yeah, well, I understand. Okay, so he talked about how humans started there, and when I say human, I don't mean early humans. Cayce talked about the modern version of humans.
Yes.
But that was all in Atlantis. And again, Cayce's Atlantis was from the part of the Americas that include Florida, part of Mexico and the Yucatan, a little bit of South America, all of the Caribbean, all of the islands that were in the middle of the Atlantic, all the way over to the Straits of Gibraltar and what was called Spartel Island right outside of the Straits of Gibraltar. He says that was the empire of Atlantis. And I mean, even Plato said that you could go out of the straits, out of the Pillars of Hercules, which are the Strait of Gibraltar, that if you went into the true ocean, you could hop from island to reach, and his exact quote is, the opposite continent, which nobody knew there was an opposite continent when Plato wrote that. Of course, obviously somebody did, but that wasn't common knowledge at the time. And go ahead, sorry.
Beyond just the roads right there with Gibraltar and everything that's speculated, we know that the Mayans had ancient roads, and like another means of travel were these stargates. The idea of going from continent to continent, for everybody out there, like, and they like to think that we were primitive, right? We didn't have cross-continental
couldn't use a boat.
Yeah, we couldn't use boat. We couldn't even use our brain. We couldn't use blimps. We couldn't use these spaceships that we see on these Egyptian hieroglyphs, these helicopters, whatever they are, right?
Yeah, well, the mainstream tells us that all that's nonsense. I don't think it's nonsense, but I can't prove that it isn't. I know what Cayce said about it. And I know that here's the other thing I know. When Christopher Columbus got here, Columbus and his men witnessed when they were traveling all over. Columbus never set foot in North America. You know that, right? Columbus never, he was only in the islands of the Caribbean. He never got here.
Yeah.
But when they were going to different islands, they encountered these giant canoes. And the giant canoes had over 100 rowers in them. And they were trading. And they were faster than any of the sailing ships that were there. They could move. So imagine you've got a canoe that's wide enough for two men to sit in, two people side by side. And they all have paddles. And you've got 50 people canoeing. How fast could you go?
Like 70 miles per hour.
You could go You could go pretty fast like that. And Columbus mentioned that. Many others mentioned it. If you go to a mound museum called Crystal River in Florida, near the town of Crystal River, and you go into the museum and you talk to the staff there, the on-site staff who are not archaeologists, they will show you some canoes, and they'll tell you some of the stories about how they believe that the people at the Crystal River mound site, which is quite old, it was started around 300 AD at least by then. But they would trade with people in the Yucatan and people that were in the Olmec culture at that time by using these canals, these canoes, by buzzing across the Gulf of Mexico. They just take the Gulf of Mexico, or if they needed to, they just hug the coastline and go around and get there. So a lot of mainstream says they were doing this. It's just that, they were doing it then. Obviously, they couldn't have done it thousands and thousands of years before that. But we know that's not true either. We simply know it's not true. How in the world did the people from the area around Australia and New Zealand, how did they get into South America? They had to take boats. And I know this.
I hear about that story of Tiki.
Oh, yeah, Kontiki, absolutely. I've seen the films on it. I never met the guy that did all that, but one of the things that we realized, if you take a raft, a really good raft, and you just drop it in the water off of New Zealand and let it float, it takes a couple weeks. It'll go a little south, and then it moves along Antarctica. Doesn't hit Antarctica, but it moves along Antarctica. And then it hits South America and southern Chile, and then it would move right up the coast of Chile, all the way till it gets to the middle of South America, and then it starts rotating back the other way, and it makes a giant circle. And what I'm telling you is a group of people 50,000 years ago could have gotten on some very large rafts. They could have been good fishermen and simply just collected rainwater, carry what food they want. They don't have to paddle. They don't have to sail. They could just have floated all the way around. I'm not saying that's what they did, but it certainly means it's possible. And since some of those people are in South America, somebody did that at some time in the past.
Yes, there's always this idea of our ancient ancestors being this lost tribe of ship wanderers or ship masters, right? There's this tribe, right? I think that Phoenicians came from them. We even look at
Okay.
like Noah and the Ark. These guys were ship masters or whatever. And the tribe after that, and I think even in Greece and Atlantis, there's this idea that
Well,
some
there
of
is. The Phoenicia, there's a group called the Sea People who remain a mystery today. The Sea Peoples, they're called. They're likely early Phoenicians, but nobody really knows, who were very good sailors. They went all over the Mediterranean. They were good fighters too. They probably went outside the Mediterranean. I know that the Phoenicians got to the Canary Islands. The Phoenicians reached all of those islands in the Atlantic, and I have no doubt that some Phoenicians and maybe even the Romans probably got to South America, though I doubt that they survived very long, and I doubt they ever got back. And the reason is their amphora and artifacts have been found in the water. Their ships must have sunk. There's a lot of stuff like that, all of which is the mainstream archaeology says, or they're not necessarily hoaxes. It's just, well, somebody was carrying, a bunch of amphora from Rome, and they were taking it there, but it was in the 1800s and the ship sank. That's what they said. Or the 70 to 80 Roman coins that have been found in North America. Another one was found a few months ago. That all those coins, even those found in coal mines, were just somebody dropped them. And I don't know how many people in the 1800s who came over here, or 1700s, who were Europeans who managed to, migrate or move to the Americas for their new life, thinking that there was nobody else here, and untapped resources. That's why they came. I don't understand why they would have carried handfuls of Roman coins with them. I don't think they did. I think it was much earlier people that came here, traders that probably had Roman coins as well as Chinese coins. A lot of ancient Chinese coins have been found in America too. And of course, the explanation always is, oh, some Chinese came over here and they dropped them by accident, but it's not ancient. That's what you hear all the time. But yeah, I do think that there's evidence that there were other people here, probably many intrusions. The Vikings were probably here a lot more than what is generally conceived of or accepted. It is possible that some of the Templars came here. Like, it's very popular right now that maybe some Templars came maybe during the Middle Ages or after. But there's a lot of ideas in this. People have to specialize in this. They specialize in very small areas within it. I guess when you get really old like I am, you can, you've specialized in so many different things, you wind up knowing a little about a lot instead of a lot about a little.
Dude, yeah, man, this conversation is a lot for everybody out there and for me too. And you know what? Let's go ahead and save this for another day, dude. There's a million more questions. I think we're wrapping it up tonight. Let everybody know what you're working on, where they can find you, and I'm gonna go ahead and DM you so we can get together another time.
Well, find me on Twitter, folks. Twitter. Just Put my name in, Gregory L. Little. Use the middle initial. It's L as in Lee, Gregory L. Little. You'll find me. You can also Google that. You'll find books there. My Vita is even there. If you Google my full name with that middle initial, you'll see my Vita. The reason you put that middle initial in is because there's two NFL football players named Gregory Little. So
Yeah.
we all know that NFL football players have to be first when you're searching for a name. That's just the way it is. So that is the way it is. Put my middle initial in. What I'm working on, I am working on a book on mound rituals, various types of mound rituals. I don't want to talk too much about it. I had finished it and decided I wanted to expand it a bit, and that'll be out in a few months. My main stuff, I don't see any in here that I can show you. I write other books too. If you go on
link's down
Twitter,
below.
yeah, I've got 70 some books in print. So they're in a lot of different topics. A lot of them are college textbooks. I wrote a textbook in psychopharmacology and obesity, criminal personality, criminal treatment, theories of psychology, a lot of mainstream stuff. So I'm actually mainstream. But when it comes to this stuff, I'm willing to look at everything and call archaeologists, just tell them, you haven't disproven this. Here's one thing I'll say. Archaeologists will tell you that it's up to you to prove your idea. No, it isn't. It is not. They'll say things like extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. Bullshit. That's a sentence somebody came on. Carl Sagan wasn't the first person to say that, but it's not a rule. You just need proof. A claim needs proof. And when they say that it's up to you to prove that Atlantis ever existed, I can say Atlantis existed because Plato wrote about it. And they say, yeah, but it's a fake story. And I say, you just made a claim, prove it's fake. And they can't. They are making claims that they can't prove either. So, I'm willing to look at any and all of this. And I don't discount much. There's some things that I know are absurd. There's a lot of absurd ideas, absolutely. So anyway, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, before you go, look, there's a
Sure.
comment from a Billy in Philly. Says, Greg, thanks for your work in both Crystal River, Florida, and the work in Philippi
yeah.
Park and Safety Harbor. I visited both these
Oh,
mounds.
wow.
And he's thinking that Homo sapiens can be pushed back past 20,000 years, man.
Okay, so I do want to answer his question. How long have we been here? So the best evidence right now puts us here 50,000 years ago. 50,000. However, there were probably earlier branches of humanity.
Yes,
Maybe Neanderthals. Mainstream archaeology calls them Neanderthaloid. Neanderthaloid, which means they look like Neanderthals, but we haven't tested them genetically. So we don't know if they're really Neanderthals, but that's what the literature calls them, Neanderthaloids. So there are sites. There's the Sereti site in California that is very close to a site where Louis Leakey near San Diego found human artifacts dating to 250,000 years ago. 250,000 years ago. And it's very close to the Sereti site where it dates to about 130,000 years ago. And that Sereti site was found by mainstream archaeology. And Louis Leakey was famous at the time. And Louis Leakey got so much trouble from mainstream archaeology, he just quit. He quit. I'm done. He said, I'm done with this. There is in South America, actually in Mexico, lots of sites. There are lots in South America that date to 50,000 and 30,000 BC. None of them are accepted by North American archaeology. There's one site in Mexico near Mexico City. It is called Hueyatlaco. I'll say it again, Hueyatlaco. Hueyatlaco could date to 400,000 BC. Who dated the artifacts at Hueyatlaco? The United States Geological Survey, the Sorbonne in France, the Max Planck Institute in Germany, and several other European sites. Those are the people who have dated the habitation of Huayatlaco to 400,000 years ago. So who was that? Well, we know the Denisovans were around then. The Neanderthals were probably around then. There might have been some, maybe Homo habilis, some Gigantopithecus, whatever. I don't know. But that's where it's at right now. That's where it's at. I hope I answered it.
And this is where the truth is at. I appreciate you, Greg Little. Tell them that you've been on the 509 Divine Pines podcast.
I'll do it. This 509 Divine, man, I love it. 509 Divine Pines, good podcast, lots of fun. Listen in, folks.
I appreciate you guys. Hey, all of you guys, like, subscribe, share. Go find Greg Little on Twitter. I hope you guys have an amazing Thursday. It is Thursday, Blursday. Pray, meditate, pray to God, be with God, and be at your most high.
All right,
peace.
Take care, folks.
Peace and blessings. I love y'all. I'm gonna play an outro now. Yeet. Hey guys, if you guys could go over to C60 at Shop C60 and use coupon code 509 Divine Pines for the world's best carbon 60 antioxidant. If you want to go ahead and get energized, if you want to look like me, feel like me, they have a youth serum. If you want to be sharp at the gym, they have the oil that you need. The gummies on the go, oil for your dog, a little bit of everything. Use coupon code 509 Divine Pines for a discount. And also go to boomerboost.com for a one in the world barley blend, supercharged by Ionic Superstorm with just unbelievable heritage. Yes, from the gladiator marshes over in Rome, and something along those lines over in Europe. It is literally a ancient seed that was regrown. So this is literally a once in the world blend. Use coupon code 509. Use coupon code Joe30 over at boomerboost.com for 30% off your order. And thank me later. Peace. Love you.